Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to episode 49 of the Snarp Fangle Podcast. I am your host, Jake Metzger, as well as Will Smith's biggest fan. Sorry, I meant to say, and along with my co-host, who is Will Smith's biggest fan, ladies and gentlemen, David Reed. How are you doing, David? He's on the ceiling right now. He's coming down, guys. Don't worry. He comes. He's making. All right. There he is.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Yeah. And yes, I'm glad that you introduced me as a Will Smith fan, because I must confess that I simply love everything the man does. Those Will Smithisms, I just can't get enough of them.
Oh. And as we jump into this Willennium, we have another guest, and the guest this week is a recurring robot lover. She's got a thing for machines. Ladies and gentlemen, Adelaide Metzger.
You're not wrong. I will not be ashamed of that.
The last couple of times you've been on, I have been so tempted to write down just robosexual, just in bold.
That's
I haven't done that because I don't feel like it fits.
Okay.
We're not there yet, Adelaide.
Maybe in the next 10 years.
Oh, God, no. With Optimus or whatever the Elon's robot is called. Which is hilarious he's calling it Optimus, because why? Don't do that.
Just because people buy it.
He should call it Sunny, like what we're going to talk about today.
Nobody knows what that is. People don't watch this movie anymore.
In the meantime, can you look up the acronym for his name? And while you do that, for comments, concerns, hate mail, and general thoughts, and what you'd think a bicentennial man film played by starring Tim Allen would look like, to snarpfanglepod at gmail.com. David, Adelaide, we have gotten back together to do a 2 films podcast entry to the Snarp Fangle Saga. And I am very excited for this one because we are talking about 2 robot films. The first one is iRobot, and the second one is Short Circuit. Wow, this is awesome. I can't wait to talk about this. So let's just hop right into iRobot here. The year is 2035. A technophobic comedian assaulter chases down a robot on the run who thinks he's sentient and might be guilty of murdering his creator. Directed by Alex Proyas. I think that's how you pronounce that.
I think it's Proyas.
Proyas? Yeah, Proyas. He did The Crow in 1994. He also did Dark City and Knowing. Movie was written, original script was written by Jeff Vinter, and then rewritten by Akiva Goldsman, based off the short stories by Isaac Asimov. Starring Will Smith, Bridget Moynihan, Alan Tudyk, Bruce Greenwood, and Farmer Hogan himself, James Cromwell.
Love that guy.
Budget was $120 million. Box office was $353, roughly. With a runtime of 1 hour and 55 minutes. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to pass along actually to you, Adelaide. I know we grew up watching this film. It's a big thing, I think, growing up.
And I feel like in our family, there's like the staple films that mom rewatches, and iRobot is one of them.
Yeah, it's like, I want to watch an adventure movie or a detective show.
Right. I feel like a space movie today.
Yeah.
Star Trek.
Yeah, I want to watch an adventure movie, so we'll watch Indiana Jones or her new favorite's Uncharted. She loves Uncharted with Tom Holland.
No, her one after Uncharted was the Gorilla Show.
The Gorilla Show.
The Gorilla Show?
Try and guess what the Gorilla Show is.
Try to guess what the Gorilla Show is, David.
It's a show about a gorilla?
There's a gorilla in it.
There is a gorilla in it, yes.
Is it?
He's a girl.
Is it like that?
Which is also true.
Is it anything like that, Clint Eastwood movie with the orangutan?
No.
There's a Clint Eastwood movie about... I think I know what you're talking about. Is it about a special needs orangutan? Or am I...
A special needs orangutan?
I think that's what it's when he's young, right?
I don't remember what the movie's called now. My brain keeps saying Turner and Hooch, but it's not that. No. That's a movie about a dog, not an orangutan.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The dog looks a little bit like an orangutan.
Adelaide, what is Mom's Gorilla Show?
It's Transformers Rise of the Beasts with the gorilla robot.
And she calls it the Gorilla Show.
She said, I want to watch the Gorilla Show, and she'll fast forward to the gorilla.
Yeah. I'm like,
okay.
Mom, let's watch King Kong. No, it's like 4 hours long. I'm not going to sit through all that. If you're going to watch it, I'm going to fast forward a lot of it. I'm like, all right, Mom. So,
But it's got a gorilla in it.
but it's got a gorilla in it. Andy Serkis.
It does have a gorilla.
Hey, human performing as a gorilla. Oh, speaking of humans performing as gorillas and monkeys in general, me and Ange went to go see Better Man, one of the dozens of people that went to go
Jelly.
see it.
I
One of
wanted
the
to see it.
dozens of people.
Yeah, it made $1 million opening
I saw
weekend.
that. That's sad.
It's like, oh my God. But yeah, I mean, we went to go see it at 10 p.m. because it was the only showing available.
Did you like it?
I liked it. I did.
I want to see
It's
it.
like, I wasn't expecting it to be like super hard R like it is. Like hard R in the sense of there's a lot of drugs and a lot of
I
inappropriate.
thought it was PG-13.
No, it's R.
Oh.
Like Robbie Williams, for those uninitiated who's listening, the film is called Better Man, and it's about a biopic about this performer named Robbie Williams, a singer-songwriter from Britain, which is why I've never heard of him. Sorry, guys. But yeah, I like him now. I like his music. But yeah, the film was like, oh, let's do a biopic about Robbie Williams. Well, nobody's heard of this guy. So what are we going to do? Well, let's make him a CGI ape, and he performs the whole movie.
It looked intriguing.
It's
and
good.
creative.
I think you'd like it too. It's got good music in it. His performance is really good in the ape as the ape, and his song is performing all of the songs as well. And everybody does a fantastic job. Dude, the directing, like the guy who directed Greatest Showman did this, and he just went out, bro. Like it was impressive. Like
I
was
wonder
like,
if the R rating kept families from going.
there's
to
a lot
see
of
it.
cocaine in the movie, like a lot of cocaine. And
You could just tell your kids, hey, don't do that. But
yeah, as he's dancing in a gay bar in the movie. Yeah, totally. Don't go to gay bars.
well,
kids,
they
and
can
don't
go
do
to gay
cocaine.
bars. Just don't
I mean,
do
they
coke.
can if they're of age, obviously. But and Better Man was actually pretty good. It was interesting seeing like the average biopic stuff like Downfall and all this stuff. But anyway, I'd recommend it. It's probably going to come on Netflix soon, like probably next week. Because it's not in theaters
Well, then I'll
anymore.
get to see it sooner. But
Yeah, so.
I don't think I'm going to be able to go see it in the movies.
But speaking of people dancing around in CGI, let's talk about iRobot. And I'm going to throw that over to you, Adelaide, because we got a very interesting movie from 2004 that has Will Smith not saying keep your creator's name out of your mouth.
Oh.
You know,
This is way before
This is
that.
way before. This is
Way
like
before that.
actually 20 years before, I think.
Right.
To the-
Yeah, this
or
is
21.
this is before Jada Pinkett Smith broke him.
Yep.
Right. You're
Yep.
right.
I don't know when they were married, but yeah, he's peak Will Smith, I would say, in this. Like
I think
Wild Wild
so.
West was almost at peak Smith.
Well, and then before that, he was at Men in Black. So he was like on a
Oh,
roll,
that's
you know?
true. It's the same thing. Yeah.
And then as he entered the early 2000s, I think that's when he got offered less. I did hear like he was in a couple movies around that time, and then he just went off the map or whatever. And nobody knew what happened to him, and he said, "No, I want to focus on family and kids and stuff."
Yeah.
Speaking of Men in Black, I will say that Men in Black is kind of like the only movie I think I've ever seen where Will Smithisms actually make sense for his
It's a
character.
quirky movie.
For his character, you know?
Right.
In every other movie he's in, it's just like, bam, Will Smith. And it's like, how does Will Smith fit within the universe of this movie? Poorly. That's the answer. Poorly.
But
watching the iRobot this morning as I was getting ready for work,
Oh.
I was kind of thinking that. It just suddenly dawned on me that I'm like, oh, this is an actor that I did admire at the time. And so I'm like, now as an adult watching this movie again with a different perspective, I'm like, does he fit in this movie? And I think he does for that
I
personality.
think they make it work pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, they make it work, but it's still Will Smith.
It is.
It's
not
an
wrong.
acquired taste. I don't know. Let's go over our general thoughts of the film, and then we'll get into a little bit of trivia, and then and then we'll go from there. So, Adelaide, I'm gonna hand it off to you. What do you think of iRobot, and what's your history with this film?
It's not a surprise, I love this movie. It's about robots.
No way.
At the time, I think it was the first movie I went to go see as a young teenager where my parents didn't go with me.
Ooh, really?
I think it was Angela and Thad, maybe. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I remember because what our mom used to do is she would go see a movie she thought would be too mature or scary or whatever for us. And she would come back and recount the whole movie she'd play out the movie for us like she's telling us a story. She started to do that when she came home with this movie. She said, you know what? You guys are 13. You can go see this movie. So we did. We went to go see it with someone else. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, I love this movie. At the time of seeing the movie, I did not know who Isaac Asimov was, but it was the movie where I saw based on the books in the credits. I was like, this is based off books because I just read Lord of the Rings. I was old enough to read Lord of the Rings and understand what was going on. So I was like, I'm going to check it out. Then I went on my hunt. I actually have a cute little anecdote about going to buy one of the books for his robot series. Yeah. I went to Barnes & Noble. I was buying the third robot series book and I was on number 2. So I was buying the third one to get ready for when I was finished. And it was an elderly woman who was checking me out. She had to be in her 80s. At least at the time, I believed she was in her 80s. She was pretty old. And she grabbed the book and she goes, and she caresses it with her thumb. And she starts like petting it. And I was like,
oh my God.
And she goes, Isaac Asimov. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm getting into his books. You know, I'm reading it. It was like a year after we saw the movie. And she goes, I had the biggest crush on Isaac Asimov.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, oh, that's cool, you know. And at the time I thought it was really cute and admirable because I think if it was a year later, I would have been 15. But it was funny because I'm like, he is definitely not the kind of author that he would have groupies, you know.
Oh my, no.
And I guess he did have a lot of female fans that later in the century, because his works go from the 40s published all the way up through the early 90s before his death. And toward the 80s, he had all these female followers who were reading his books. And a lot of the requests were, you need to be more emotional and write more romance from these female readers. And so the third book...
no, really?
I don't know what he was doing.
Oh.
You can tell he wasn't into it. He's like, I'm just trying to give the people
what they want, you know?
It's all right.
Yeah,
it's definitely not.
That never works out for a creator long term. Never.
I don't really recommend that one.
Yeah, it's a struggle, but that's a topic for a different
time. Yeah,
so you encountered a very closeted robosexual in Barnes & Noble that was very open about it. Like,
I think she was more Asimov sexual.
Yeah, just Asimov.
Not robosexual.
This man is a genius.
But yeah,
she was
Soviet
an
nuclear
Asimov
scientist. Yeah.
she was an Asimov stan.
I don't even know if he was a nuclear scientist.
No, he had no involvement with the bomb.
He was from Russia, though, right?
He was Russian. He was born in America, but his parents immigrated from Russia.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And he's Russian Jew.
All right.
So yeah, that's my history with it. And then I've read pretty much all his robot works. I haven't read the Foundation series. I read the first one and I was not a fan. There's no robots in it, so.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because it has to do with like Or3. I don't know what it has to do with.
It's about clones and the future of humanity and where we could be going.
It's kind of similar. It's kind of paints a similar picture of like humanity's future expansion into the universe, kind of the same way Dune does.
Yeah,
it's not to say that it's anything like Dune, but it's kind of focused on that in a sense. It's focused on the future of humanity as they expand across the stars.
And it's interesting too. It was Asimov, Robert Heinlein, and one more guy
was it H.G. Wells?
No, he was way before
Ray Bradbury.
H.G. Wells published in the
okay. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Never mind.
But it was 3 of them who are called the fathers of science fiction.
Is it Arthur C. Clarke?
Maybe because they were all under
Ray Bradbury.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I don't think it's Ray Bradbury because Ray Bradbury is more on the fantastical side of things.
No, Ray Bradbury has quite a few science fiction writings.
Yes, you're correct. But they went from taking it, well, their editor said, let's turn science fiction into more of a factual future. And so they drifted away from pulp, which was like John Carter. What's the Space Dandy? Not Space
Dandy.
Not Space Dandy.
That's an anime.
No. Well, it might have been around the time in the early 50s. But it went from less pulpy, and they said, let's kind of gear it more toward what the future could look like. And that's where those 3 authors really honed in their skills.
So yeah, it was Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein, and,
Arthur C.
and
Clarke.
Asimov.
Okay.
I mean, that makes sense
Yeah.
because Arthur C. Clarke was the author of
Starship Troopers. No, wait.
No,
that's Robert Heinlein.
Heinlein. Sorry,
He was the
Heinlein.
author of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
That was Philip K. Dick.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
You're
Philip K.
right.
Yeah,
oh, my
Philip
God.
K.
I'm getting... What did Arthur C. Clarke write?
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes,
2001,
there we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Okay. I was getting my sci-fi authors mixed up, which is really bad on
Too
my
many of
part
them.
because I was a huge sci-fi book nerd in my younger days. So it's kind of embarrassing that I made that mix up, but
Okay, it's been a minute.
such is life.
Such is life.
The
Yeah.
memory starts to go when you're our age. It's not as bad.
Yeah. At
Well,
the
before
ripe
that
old
memory-
age of 35.
Well, before that memory goes away, David, let's get your opinion on iRobot and what you think of the film.
Yeah, so iRobot
Also goes at this age.
iRobot was one of those films that was kind of like, I think along the same way of what Adelaide was talking about, kind of like it's one of the family favorites, so to speak. We would watch it when it was on TV, kind of a thing. I think the first time I ever saw it, though, I think we rented the DVD from like a local, video rental place. And I had already read the books by the time that I hadn't read all of Asimov, but I read the iRobot books by the time that I saw the movie. And so it was kind of like sort of the opposite thing for me because I really liked iRobot, like the books. And so when I saw the movie, it was just like, this isn't the world of Asimov's writing.
Mhm.
This isn't Asimov at all. But other than my initial disappointment over it not actually really being very much like Asimov's works at all, I enjoyed it. It's it is a well done movie from like a creative and technical standpoint. But yeah, I've never disliked it, so to speak. Although as I've grown older, I've become far less tolerant of Will Smith-isms.
Definitely.
So no watching the Aladdin live action remake.
Oh hell no!
Yeah,
I saw like a clip of him doing the "You Never Have a Friend Like Me" song.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's it. I'm never watching this movie.
I can't.
Yeah, that was interesting. I remember going to see
like
that, and I'm like,
movie.
I don't know. Like he's singing it, and I'm like, this is working okay. Like I could see a lot of people not liking this, but he made it his own. But it's really, really hard to watch that without thinking of Robin.
If you're
Williams,
not a
basically.
child, who's
Yeah.
Part of the thing
yeah.
too is, Will Smith-isms aside, is they could have at least allowed him to kind of make the character his own.
Mm-hmm.
That might have actually been refreshing. As much as I'm not a fan of Will Smith, him making the character of the genie his own might have been, especially with the song, might have been something that was, might have been refreshing. But he didn't. He basically kind of hit all the Robin Williams beats, did the little mini impressions that Robin Williams liked to weave into his
the weird little vocal noises and stuff he does.
Yeah, all the because if you break down that song and you look at how he does it, he basically what he does is he does this in all of his stand-up work. He kind of weaves little impressions of different characters and people kind of into it. And then you see Will Smith doing that, like hitting all those beats in the same beats in the song.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is really weird. It would have been less weird for him just to do Will Smithify it.
Right.
Total.
But they apparently couldn't let him do that for whatever
He did release
reason.
outside of the actual movie, which played during the credits of the movie. He released a rap version. But I can't remember who he did it. DJ Khaled and him did a rap version of
yeah.
"You Never Had a Friend
I
Like
forgot
Me."
about that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's all right.
It's all right. I mean, I love me some Guy Ritchie, but I feel like it's like Disney had the whip.
I feel like it's the lowest.
Disney
the
had
less
the whip.
Guy Ritchie.
Disney had
of
the
Guy
creative
Ritchie.
whip behind him at all time. Be like, you better behave, British man. It's like, oh, British gangster movie creator, dude. Like, you better make it for kids, you know. I don't know. I think
follow that script, boy.
of all the live action Disney remakes they've done, that's probably, and this isn't saying much, it's probably one of the bright spots of them all. Besides, like, I haven't seen Cinderella, and I hear it's like legit,
I do rewatch
legit
Aladdin.
one of the best ones.
I haven't seen Cinderella.
I mean, it's Kenneth Branagh, like actual Kenneth Branagh doing his thing, making a love story in classical English lore. So that sells me on it. But
back to iRobot.
Back to iRobot. Yeah.
I did look up Sonny's. His name is Sonny, like Sonny Boy, like a little, like a kid.
Sonny.
Sonny.
Yeah.
So he's called that because he's seen as like the son of what's his face, James Cromwell's character.
So I have it written down here.
Dr. Lanning.
Dr. Lanning. Thank you. No, Lanning's the no. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Took me a minute.
Yes. No.
Yeah. Growing up, this was another film that was like another repeat viewing. Like I've probably seen this film like countless times, and I remember being little when we watched it. I never went to the theaters or anything, but I remember watching it at home. And just like Lord of the Rings films, like I never got a chance to see, except for Return of the King when they did the re-releases or whatever. I got to see Return of the King in theaters.
Oh, that's good.
Extended edition, which is awesome. And I would love to see this on a big screen because this movie is like, yes,
very cinematic,
big summer blockbuster with Will Smith, sci-fi, futuristic. Here we go. And I think, I was watching it this time kind of the same way you were doing, David, but kind of trying to find faults. Kind of like what Ali was saying. Like, I love this. I grew up loving this film, but I was like trying to figure, trying out and on this viewing, some of the Will-isms, or whatever you call them, the part of the Willennium mass, they are distracting, actually. But not to the extent of I want to like, not like the visceral reactions you had to them, David. But I do think they're quite annoying, and I feel like they don't fit at times. But stuff like for example, him and his grandma Gigi, Will Smith called his own grandma Gigi, and that's why they call him Gigi.
Yeah, that's quite sweet.
And that was like his insert of that, and that's what him and Akiva Goldberg or Goldstein, I can't remember his name.
I think it's Goldsman.
I have it written right here.
Goldman?
Goldsman, yeah. That's what he worked with Will Smith on and a lot of that kind of stuff. But some of the stuff like, oh, you thought I called you sugar? Like, it's just kind of, okay. You know, we're getting a laugh out of this, but at the extent of, you know.
It's weird too because his character is so like, he's like a tragic kind of character because he's suffering from this trauma of the accident that he had and everything, which I was trying to guess at what point in the timeline happened in the movie. I don't know if it's been a couple years or what when that happened, but so it's like you're seeing this guy who's cynical. He's got this paranoia against these daily machines that everyone else seems is fine because of his trauma, but he got that job for a reason because he can work with people and because he's a homicide detective, but I don't know.
Like he's obviously good at his job.
So it is kind of weird when like he's joking around, but then I'm like, well, I mean, you got to know how to talk to people and make them feel comfortable, but I feel like he makes people feel the opposite of comfortable whenever he's talking with them because he's everybody's enemy. He's like everybody. Calvin, he's trying to warm up to her and she just shuts him down. And then the, what's his face?
The chief?
No, the
Sonny or
no, the guy who owns the company.
Oh, the CEO,
right?
Yeah. Bruce Woods.
So I don't know. It's just it's odd, but I didn't think it was unwatchable.
I mean, it's not unwatchable. It doesn't ruin the movie.
No,
But it's like you can't help but notice.
You pause for a second. You're like, all right.
Yeah, it's like okay, you know, moving on.
It's there's a couple moments that were just groan-inducing for me, but it's like it didn't ruin the movie.
And it was like late at night when we were watching it. Like after
you watched it last night.
Yeah, after you guys came over and watched Short Circuit, we put that in, and it's like, I think you were very tired, David, and so your reactions were very, I don't know how to
Also, I
describe
haven't
them.
seen a Will Smith movie in a long time.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Because he tries to avoid them. So
Well, I don't think it's been a conscious thing. It's just been, as I've seen, I've seen basically all the major ones, and other than Men in Black, like the first one, I don't really have any great love for any of them. So I watch other movies.
Yeah, just by happenstance,
But if I have to choose,
but
it's not going to be a Will Smith movie.
Something I love about this film is and I'll talk about it later too, but the way it reveals all the secrets and stuff. We'll get into spoilers soon.
Like the mystery, how they wrote
the
it.
Mystery,
and
the at times they reveal things are kind of, I wouldn't say perfect, but near perfect. Like they're pretty dang good. Like, I mean, this also one thing I also like about this film is that it doesn't go too long. Like it's an hour and 55 minutes, perfect summer blockbuster time frame. You can do this or 2:15, and there you go. You're in the perfect time.
Yeah.
However, this film does a really good job at pacing, and I feel like you can't really cut any more fat off of this. In fact, I don't think there's very much fat to cut off, because everything is there for a purpose.
Right.
Because it's part of a mystery. And
Other than the Will Smithisms,
other than Will
of course.
Smithisms, yeah, like you could use...
Kidding, we can't get that out of the script.
Converse sold 2004. It's like, here I go, It's
that's
that's
their
fun,
paycheck.
though.
They can't
That's
leave
true,
that out of the movie.
And there's funny, and I've seen I think that's a good example of adding in product placement in a funny and unique way. Like, I hate the way Michael Bay does it in his films, especially in like
it's
Transformers.
Just gross, the way he does
it's really
it.
gross.
Yeah.
Like Mark Wahlberg getting into a car crash with a Transformer and then
With
yelling at it,
Budweisers.
and then a Budweiser truck empties out and he's like
Picks
yelling
up
at
the
it.
Budweiser.
Yeah, he
and drinks
picks
it.
up a Budweiser, drinks it, and he throws it at a Chinese guy. It's like, whoa, okay.
At a Chinese guy.
This is weird. But
Those movies need some fat cut off.
oh my God, there's so much. But yeah, I would say that. I don't know. What do you think, Adelaide? Is there, on this viewing, what was you established your goal. Did you meet that goal, or did you find anything else new out of this film?
I just kind of went in because I've seen it so many times I could almost quote it, but I went into it this time taking those rose-colored glasses off. Like, let's look at it from, because I probably haven't seen the movie in like 5 years, and just knowing what I know now about like cinema and film and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, the pacing was good, and the reveals I think that you were mentioning, I was like, oh yeah, this movie is written really well, because if you're watching it for try to imagine watching it for the first time without knowing anything about going into it. They do a great job. What's like the magic trick? They distract you. The Prestige. They distract you with this, and then they reveal something else. And if you hadn't if you weren't into science fiction in the first place, you probably wouldn't have guessed that the supercomputer was the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah, and they do a good job of like, oh, of course it's going to be the CEO character or whatever, right?
Right.
And you get the sense of, okay, it can't just be him. Like, we haven't been introduced to a ton of other people for it to be. So
it was Gigi.
It was Gigi, So it's I feel one thing that really bothers me about this film though is that I want to dive deeper. Like, there's so much that they introduce and that they show, and I'm like, what else is going on? Like, what other AI stuff are they creating? What other robots? I mean, we get a good sense of how society functions with them, obviously.
Like domestic.
But I want like deeper, like what was Lanning also working on?
Well, she mentioned there's a line that Calvin mentions. He says, what does he say? He says, I'll take the special guard, I'll take the military, hell, I'll even take the cavalry. And she said they all use our products. We produce weapons for them. And he says, why didn't you hand the world on a silver platter? And she says, maybe we did. Yeah, because I'm like, even the Canadian cavalry, they own, but like, it's like Apple. Like, if Apple did something like this, everybody would own a robot. Or like with what's his face, with the Tesla robots. Yeah. Eventually, everybody might own one of those. So our world very much will be going in that direction. Yeah,
that's another aspect of rewatching it during this period of American history or just world history. It's like, man, this is only 10 years away from what they show in the film, you know? So it's like, I mean, I can see beer being that much in 10 years, maybe, but maybe not. You know, these guys walking around, but who knows? It's 10 years away. But I feel like this movie does a good job of pacing things because, like, in 2025, I could see something looking like this in the future. Not flying cars or anything, or like the cars that roll and all like
that was cool. Those are cool, like
that kind of technology. But I could see something like the robots are walking around grabbing our groceries. You're paying a subscription to SpaceX or whatever, or Apple or whatever company, and you're like, oh, it does my groceries, it gets the dishes done, it does these simple chores that save me a lot of time. Right. You know,
the dangers of conveniency. It's because it's like, I mean, that's what our phones do for us now. We carry everything with us, our notes, we have our bank on here, we have everything's on there.
I bet you they're trying to figure out, like at Apple and Google and stuff right now, like, okay, theoretically, when we do get these guys, if they don't have the premium subscription plan, are they just going to spit out ads at certain points for robots, you know? Like as it comes in and puts away the groceries, like, you know what? Did you know you could get 2% for just less with this coupon, you know? Like just random
You
stuff
tell the
like
robot
that.
to go get a certain type of spaghetti.
It brings in
like,
a better one.
I bought you this one. It was $5 more
I bought you Prego. Here you go. It's like, no, I wanted
the cheaper one.
Yeah, I wanted the cheaper one. I wanted the name brand one.
Because it's sponsored by that company.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Oh man.
Can we talk about the 3 laws real quick?
Yeah, let's go over the 3 laws and then I want to go into some trivia here.
Okay. So the 3 laws, we all know what the 3 laws are. A robot may not harm a human being, or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, a robot must obey everything a human being orders it to do, unless through an action allows that human being to come to harm. And then number 3, it has to have self-preservation, unless this for the same reason, like unless it or comes to harm humans. There was an article by one of the Google analysts, and they brought up the idea of the 3 laws because obviously we're going in that direction, and people are saying, why don't we come up with something like the 3 laws, since AI is kind of, evolving before our very eyes. But the thing with the 3 laws is they're flawed in a point to where, like, examples in the movie showed that, but even all of Asimov's short story collections and novels were showing how flawed they were. There were holes where, like, if you weren't really, really clearly specific to the robot, if you aren't specific with your order, it's going to do some goofy things. It's going to go run around in circles for 10 hours or something like that. Or it's going to go hide. There's an example in the movie where Sonny goes and hides, and that's actually based on one of the short stories called Little Lost Robot, where he told the robot to go get lost. So it did, and it went to hang out with its own kind, and they had no idea where it was. They're like, whoa, look at all these robots. So it's basically the scene where they walk in, and there's all those robots. But yeah, the 3 laws are definitely flawed, and Asimov showed examples on how they could be bypassed or bent, but not broken. It's really interesting, like how people are like, oh, we need the 3 laws of robotics, but even that Google analyst's article I read said, well, we're going to have to update them or like come up with something like it, but not use Asimov's 3 laws because... yeah, they're not perfect.
We're going to have to come up with some amendments for these laws.
Right. And even in the movie, he says, what's wrong with the 3 laws? Lanning says the 3 laws are perfect, and that's all he says. And you're like, how are they perfect if they are not working?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's just interesting.
Well, there's the quote where he's talking to him by the bridge area where all the robots are stored and before the fight happens. And he's like, it only leads to one logical conclusion. This could just be his like robot or like his program, like on the hologram telling this, but it could be something like, well, it could be, revolution. And then it goes to that, but that could just be a pre-recorded.
I don't know if you have a note on how the computer Vicky goes outside the 3 laws.
I don't know.
That's actually, they don't say it in the movie, but it's part of the 0th law, which is the 4th law, which showed up in his 4th robot novel, Robots and Empire, which was like a bridge to Foundation and his robot series. Yeah. And the 0th law is a robot must not allow humanity to come to harm. Or through an action must not allow humanity to come to harm. And it preserves it above the other 3. So they will hurt humans. and they will kill humans in order to preserve humanity as a whole. So like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And the robot who evolves into that law in that book ends up dying because his programming, it's going against everything his inner workings of programming are made for, but he still was able to do it. To save humanity. He stopped this guy from hitting a button or something, from blowing up something. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read it. But the main android character from the robot murder mystery novels is with him. And he's slowly watching him slow down and break down and die. And his last words are something like, protect humanity, Daniel. And then Daniel goes on into the Foundation series.
Oh, interesting.
Which is interesting. But Vicky is portraying the zeroth law because she's evolved past, like her brain is so brilliant and she's like, well, here's the 3 laws. They're everything that are my foundation, but she grows out of it and starts making pathway and branches and theory outside of it. And then she executes it by, doing a whole robot take over the world situation, but she's doing it to save humanity. Then I think it's Sunny at the very end who says, humanity's suicide has come to an end. So he's referring to humanity as a whole because they're like, oh, you're poisoning the oceans and the ozone or whatever. Like you're killing yourselves and you don't even know it.
Vicky went woke.
Which is interesting because in the movie, Lake Michigan's dried up.
Yeah, so it's like there's some things where
that there's environmentalism involved, but they don't. It's not part of it.
It's just in there,
So it's just interesting. I'm just like, oh, they did involve the zeroth law. They just didn't.
They just say it by name.
Yeah,
which I think is cool because can you imagine if going back to the summer blockbuster thing, it's like, oh, she made a 4th law. What? Like it would be so dumb. They could have incorporated it. Here's my thought. They could have incorporated that by being like Lanning was working on something and then Vicky found out about the 4th law and she's like, well, I must execute on that because you're my creator. And he's like, no, don't do it. And then she's like, oh, and then that's why Sunny goes outside the 3 laws as well because they were both exposed to that, his creation. That's why he died.
Yeah. I also think it's beautiful that Lanning, there's a hint of like Lanning and Sunny's relationship and how like he made him he has the 3 laws, but he made them not change to them.
He made them a choice.
Right, he made them an option.
Yeah.
So Sunny knows them, but he doesn't have to follow them like all the other robots. And it's just beautiful because it's like, that's your missing link because he is the future of what humanity is going to look like because who knows, in 500 years, there might be no humans, but there might be robots. So I think that's beautiful.
All right, before we get into the trivia, I want to say something really quickly. Because if you go on YouTube and you type in just video essays about this movie, they're all from folks who have a hate boner for Akiva Goldsman.
Oh,
Let's be real. Because there's some folks I follow who are in the writing community that do video essays and blah, blah, blah. And man, you go to the IMDb trivia, which is, like Wikipedia, you can edit it, that kind of thing. It's all the trivia is formed to be like, this is why Akiva Goldsman is bad because this and this and this happened and blah, blah, blah. And so I went through and picked a bunch of stuff out and it does seem... Basically, the facts are this, and we can get into it here, but basically there was a script made, and I'm about to jump into it, so no worries. There's a script made, 20th Century Fox purchased that script and the rights to the books of Asimov that pertain to the short stories of iRobot and everything else. They purchased the rights to them, and then they started developing this when they brought Will Smith, and they're like, holy crap, we have Will Smith. Akiva Goldsman, you're a good writer, even though you did Batman and Robin. How about you go in here and work with him and make this movie a big summer blockbuster? And that's what they did. And I feel like, before we go into the trivia again, I feel like the writing community just does not like big corporate influence on creativity, which I can relate to, but I feel like corporate entities in Hollywood and all this stuff. Yes, we hear a lot of bad news about it. Yes, they deserve a lot of they deserve bad press that they get because of crappy decisions. I mean, have you seen Akiva Goldsman and what he's written recently? It's like all a bunch of crappy stuff. But here's the thing. They all serve a purpose. Like there are some forms of corporate like influence in Hollywood that kind of make good calls. Like even though Will Smith, I would like somebody like Ron Perlman maybe, or you and me were thinking of like David mentioned Leonardo DiCaprio as the lead of this film instead of Will Smith. Like there's different ways this film could have been done, where it would have been really interesting and really cool if you don't like Will Smith. But I feel like Will Smith brings a really cool audience perspective to this film, and he serves multiple purposes. So I think I have a feeling that the writing community specifically, I'm not just saying it's them, but it could be multiple people that just don't like Akiva Goldsman. I'm not a big fan of him either, but I want to give him his flowers where he deserves it. So I'm going to go through the trivia, and I don't know. It's what came to mind as I was reading this. So, all right, let's get into it. So, number one, the movie originally started as a screenplay entitled Hardwired, a classical style murder mystery that read like a stage play and was very much in the spirit of Isaac Asimov's Three Laws mysteries. When the original Hardwired script eventually reached Fox after being developed at Disney with director Bryan Singer, new director Alex Proyas, and writer Jeff Vinter opened up the story to fit a big budget studio film. So Jeff Vinter was already involved in this when Fox got it.
So it was him who wrote it.
Yeah, he wrote it. Vinter spent, let's see, blah, blah. Oh man, I lost my spot. Opened up when Fox acquired the rights to Isaac Asimov's story collection. Vinter spent 2 years adapting Hardwired to serve as a 10th story in the Asimov canon, complete with Stevenson Calvin and the Three Laws of Robotics. Hilary Seitz, who went on to write stuff like Insomnia, Eagle Eye, and The Unforgivable, worked at one point as script doctor, but her work was discarded. And to this day, she refuses to discuss her unpleasant experience. Writer Akiva Goldsman came on late in the process to tailor the script for star Will Smith, turning the cerebral thriller into a summer action movie. I think it's really interesting. Like it just bounces around. It was at Disney, now Fox owns it. And now we got Will Smith. Holy cow. Let's make this as good as fast as possible.
It just kind of sounds like Hollywood in general, because it's not like how everybody imagines Hollywood is like, okay, first step is you write a script, then you take it to the director, then they say give you the money, and then you pick the actor. Like, more times it's more of that situation where...
Can the studio greenlight it?
Right, stuff comes and goes, and people are involved, and then they leave, and that's just show business.
And I know the comments are probably going to say on this podcast, like, well, dude, they greenlight stuff all the time just based off property and don't even have a working script yet. Do you think they're actually creative minded? No, that's not my argument. What I'm saying is it's a collaborative process, you dolts. So, I don't know. What do you think of all this?
Tell those haters.
Yeah. What do you think of all this, David? Not just the writing community and how they have a hate boner, but just in general, the whole process of how this film came to be. And we're going to dive more into it.
I mean, it's pretty standard Hollywood stuff. I mean, I understand their hate boner for Akiva Goldstein or is it Goldstein? Goldsman. Yeah. Akiva Goldsman, because he did the dark deed of tailoring this film for Will Smith. But, I mean, somebody had to do it.
Yeah. And I don't think it's like bad writing even. Like,
well, it's not bad writing. That was a joke. That was a joke.
Okay, yeah. No, the writing, no, I'm not saying you were accusing
the writing's not. The writing is actually quite great.
Yeah.
Like he managed to do some good work with this movie. Although maybe the writing was already great, and Akiva Goldsman just put on the Smithy bits to it. Yeah. You know, we don't really know.
Yeah.
But either way, it turned out great. It's a well-written movie, well-paced movie. The cinematography is great. The pacing is great. The CGI is pretty darn good. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's like the most amazing use of CGI, but it's good. It's good, and it doesn't look too fake and plasticky, and it's sort of the degree to which it does look fake and plasticky, it can kind of get away with, because it's like, we live in a fake and plasticky future kind of thing. So it overall, it's a great movie. And so all the drama surrounding the creation of it just sounds like normal Hollywood stuff. And, you know, the only hate I think the writing deserves. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think the writing deserves hate. The only hate that I think this movie deserves is the fact that somebody brought Will Smith into the project. But, it's also like at the time, Will Smith was, would have been a big draw for a movie. So it made sense to bring him on.
Yeah.
From a financial perspective and just from a general audience enjoyment perspective. But just from my own personal viewpoint, that's really the only flaw. That's the flaw from this movie is that it has Will Smith in it. Other than that, it's great. It's a great film.
And you know what's also great about it? Is the editing. That's our next thing. The main editor of this film, William Hoy, is a Hollywood editor with a very long resume. He edited films such as The Planet of the Apes trilogy, the rebooted trilogy, Dances with Wolves, Patriot Games, 300, Watchmen, and 2022's The Batman. Editing this film's really good.
So what's his name likes him?
Zack Snyder.
No.
Yeah, because 300 and Watchmen, right?
The Batman and the Apes.
Oh, Matt Reeves. Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah, Matt Reeves. Yeah.
But obviously he's very talented in what he can do.
Yeah.
He knows the ropes.
Same thing with the composer on this film.
Marco Beltran.
They have a long list of work.
It almost seems to me like everyone behind this movie just knew their chops on how to deliver an exciting action-packed movie that can appeal to the general audiences and somewhat Asimov fans, but
yeah,
I have a comment about that.
Yeah, me too. So, number 3, no reshoots were required. A rarity for a movie as big as this.
Wow. See, everybody knows what they're doing.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Professionals.
Yeah. Number 4, Will Smith told how he wrecked the motorcycle at around 60 miles per hour during the filming of the scene at the robot storage facility. You can see him begin to lose control in the film. This I do
remember that.
But apparently, he does crash the motorcycle at one point, like in real life.
Well, at the end, he does that jump. But in that storage part, there's gravel. And when he's going toward the camera, you can see the back of it go like that. And I remember always catching that watching the movie.
Okay, when it said storage facility, I thought it was talking about earlier in the film with Sonny and them trying to find him among the robots. This is talking about in the end. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Number 5, this is really weirdly written. So I'm just going to say Gary Whitta, who wrote the film Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, was asked on Twitter to name a screenplay that made him say, "Damn, this is a great screenplay." He responded, Hardwired by Jeff Venter, later rewritten heavily and turned into iRobot. Gary Whitta knows his stuff. He's a pretty renowned, I would consider him, renowned screenwriter. And that makes me wonder how heavily rewritten did Akiva Goldsman take from Hardwired? I'm really curious about that, but we can discuss that soon. So moving on. After reading Jeff Venter's early Hardwired / iRobot script, representatives of the Isaac Asimov estate considered it more Asimov than Asimov. After the hiring of Will Smith, the film changed into a summer action movie. So,
right.
Number 7, Jeff Venter had to fight for his screen story by credit and secondary film rights. A sequel has to say based on characters created by Jeff Venter through the WGA arbitration, because the studio did not want to admit the film was based on his original spec script, Hardwired. All of the writers on the film signed a letter agreeing the credits should read screenplay by Jeff Venter and Akiva Goldsman, screen story by Jeff Venter.
That happens too. If you don't sell your rights to it so that like you don't have your name on it anymore and like you get paid for that, then I mean it's common in Hollywood too. I'm glad he fought for his name to be on it because it was his the Asimov stuff wasn't his idea, but Detective Spooner's an original character that he came up with. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to actually read the Asimov books. I think that's one reason why I like the movie so much. I don't have a connection to the books, or the short stories, I should say, that they're based off of.
It's also interesting, we can talk about it later, about the Asimov fans, but like how I first saw the movie, it introduced me to Asimov, so I didn't have a knowledge of that, but David already had a knowledge of that, and he went to go see the movie. And it's interesting our different
well, my opinions on the movie have nothing to do with Asimov.
Okay.
I was initially disappointed that it wasn't very Asimov-y, because I liked Asimov. But as I watched the movie, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna enjoy it for what it is.
Right.
And I do. Like I said, it's a great film. My only my qualms with Will Smith are only on watching it now. Like when I first watched it, I wasn't
Who's this loser on screen? No.
when I first watched it, I wasn't nearly as, critical of movies as I am now. So
I don't think any of us were all pretty young. So
I just, so Will Smith didn't bother me Will Smith didn't bother me initially. That's a thing I've developed over the years. Initially, I was kind of let down that the movie wasn't very Asimov-y, but I got over that and I enjoyed it nonetheless. So, people have a right to be disappointed. But also, you got to be realistic. Like an adaptation of a property is not always going to satisfy your particular vision of what you thought that property would be like in movie form. But it's just one of those things. It's like people just can't. People just got to let that go,
Yeah, I agree. Actually, can I talk a little bit about that real quick? Sure, yeah. So, during my research of it, it's fascinating how upset a lot of all those Asimov stan women were, apparently. Well, I'm sure men too.
Okay, so wait. Actually, I only have 3 more. Okay. So let me get through this, and then we'll dive right into it, okay? Number 8, the 3 laws of... Sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like we can really go deep with that. So let's just finish this and then go and do that. Number 8, the 3 laws of robotics as stated in the film is also the same 3 laws stated in the film Bicentennial Man, 1993, by Andrew Martin, played by Robin Williams. Both films are based off works of science fiction by author Isaac Asimov. So I didn't know that. I was like, oh, wait, what? And then I felt like an idiot because you and me have talked about Bicentennial Man like quite a bit recently. And I'm like, I should have known this. So apologies. Number 9, Bruce Willis was the first choice for the role of Del Spooner, which I was like, I don't know if I believe because you said Schwarzenegger. And I'm like,
well, I'm sure sitting around the table, they're brainstorming about, okay, who can we get?
Can we get Schwarzenegger? Dang it, he's governor right now. Crap.
He wasn't governor at that time.
Yeah, 04, yeah, 03.
I thought it was after that.
No, it was 2000. Wait, no.
No,
did he go for 8 years of governor of California?
I don't remember.
We should know this. We lived through it.
I think he did 2 terms because people liked him so much.
Yeah,
but I don't know if he was governor around this time.
I don't know, but yeah, apparently Bruce Willis was the first choice.
I think it was his shooting schedule conflicted.
What's interesting is thinking about Bruce Willis doing this movie, it's like it probably would have turned out to be very similar. It probably wouldn't have turned out to be any different than it did. It just wouldn't have had those Will Smith-isms. But like they would have, given who Bruce Willis is, they would have tailored the script to be less cerebral and more action-y, more blockbustery anyway.
Could you imagine, sorry to interrupt you, dude, can you imagine if they grabbed Sam Jackson to do this instead? And they made it super Sam Jackson-y. Like he couldn't say he can only say that word once, but he would sneak it in there.
I don't see him being as visceral, like emotionally visceral in some of the scenes as Will Smith is. I don't think Sam Jackson can do it.
I'm just joking, but I thought that'd be funny to think of. But speaking of people who were also up for the role, in a 2005 interview with the magazine Total DVD, issue 71, for some reason it's listed here,
my favorite issue.
Denzel Washington revealed that he was offered the role of Spooner, but turned it down to appear in The Manchurian Candidate in 04.
Interesting.
Yeah. That would also be interesting. I think he would have murdered this role. He would have been great.
I mean, Denzel Washington pretty much kills at whatever he does. Even when the role is kind of a stretch for him, like in his recent role in Gladiator 2.
Well, I was thinking Deja Vu. Like, I could picture him in that role because he's kind of a similar character. He is a cop in that film.
Well, I think that's similar in
PI.
terms of like thriller.
Yeah, a thriller. Like he's shown he can.
thriller.
I mean, obviously in Training Day, obviously, but also I think of him in Deja Vu. I could totally see him as Spooner.
Yeah, well,
You could get Will Smith without the Will Smithisms.
Yeah, well, I'm saying I brought up Gladiator 2 because that's an example of a role that I haven't seen Gladiator 2, but from what I've seen, the clips I've seen, and from what everybody is saying about it, it seems like Denzel Washington does a great job in the movie, despite the fact that he's clearly like being in that role is kind of a stretch for him.
Agreed. Yeah, and I kind of, as somebody who's seen it, that you're saying exactly how I feel.
So yeah, so what I'm saying is really just like the fact that he can do great even when the role is like, it's like, really? Did Denzel really need to be in that role?
Yeah.
And yet he still does a great job. Like there's no question that he would have been great in this movie.
Yeah.
I agree.
Last one, number 11. When Sonny is drawing the picture of the bridge for Spooner, there's a piece of paper to the left with computer code on it. The code is that of a RenderMan shader from the stuff that Weta uses and everything. A procedural description of a surface used to describe the robot's appearance during rendering. So this is a piece of code that was used in the renderer when they would export things, when they would do the 3D models and everything. I'm using basic terms for people out there. But like the code was part of the code that helped, that Weta used basically, is my imagination. So that's kind of interesting. All right, Adelaide, fans and Asimov fans, what does it mean? Right before we do though, we're not going to do recap for this episode. Just let everybody know. Usually we do a full recap of the film.
Probably should have mentioned that.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. We're not doing a recap. I'm going to try something new. And if the fans like it, we'll keep going with it. But I feel like let's do 3 different things of our choosing that we like about the film, or main scenes we like about the film, or aspects of the film that we like. And we'll just go around and talk about that. And that's how we'll talk through the plot and what we like about it and why we would watch it again or not watch it again. So let's go with Adelaide first. Adelaide, what's your first thing you want to bring up? It doesn't have to be part of your 3, but let's dive into the fans thing.
I didn't really pick a 3 things, okay. But one of the things is I was, as someone who is a fan of Asimov's robot work specifically, it was really frustrating. And I know a lot of these feelings, like David said, people have every right to be upset if something's not what they expected it to be. But it's just frustrating for everybody to say the movie's called I, Robot. It's nothing about the book of I, Robot, which is a collection of short stories that follows a whole bunch of different robots, most of them following the character of Susan Calvin interacting with all these robots and Dr. Lanning, whatever. So people are just upset because it's not accurate. And we've already did a whole episode about accurate, like film adaptation and accuracy versus reinvention. This is a reinvented adaptation, very much so. But there are still elements of the short stories in there. Like I was just telling Jake that Little Last Robot, the short story, is in there. When they're going to find Sonny in that giant warehouse, that's an element that was part of that short story. The short story Robot Dreams from a different short story collection that was published in 84. I don't remember. It was in the 80s. And it's a collection of his other robot short stories called Robot Dreams. Sonny's Dream is part of that short story. So it's just really interesting that people rage and they're like, there's nothing of Asimov in this movie. I'm like, there's totally stuff of Asimov in this movie. And I would argue, like, I know that it's based off of Jeff Vinter's Hardwired script, but Isaac Asimov wrote 4 murder mystery novels about a detective named Elijah and his android partner, and they're solving murder mysteries surrounding robots. So, like, how can you say that this has nothing to do with Isaac Asimov when clearly there is inspiration there? Heavy inspiration.
I wouldn't say heavy. I would say it's woven in there for sure, but it's very different than Asimov's work.
It is.
And that's what I think people are upset at. Is not that it doesn't. People are upset that the tone of the film as a whole is just not. It's not really anything like Asimov would have written.
True.
There's definitely stuff that's worked in there that's inspirations from little things that Asimov put in his stories, but overall, the tone of the film is not in line with Asimov's work.
Right. I would agree with that.
I think people who are like, I like Asimov, but I'm not like an Asimov fan. Like I don't run in, the like.
You don't caress the covers of his book before you go to sleep at night?
No. Like I've pretty much only read I haven't read all of his stuff. I read all three of the iRobot trilogy. I read all those. I read the first Foundation, and I read one of his collection of short stories, which I like them all, but I'm not like an Asimov super fan. So personally, I don't really care whether or not there exists a film in the world that, portrays the spirit of Asimov's work, but I could certainly understand that people who are really big fans of his work are upset that the one big chance they had to see Asimov's work brought to life turned into something that wasn't at all like his work.
Right. And I think even the Foundation series, that's been getting a lot of good reviews, though, on Apple TV. Problem is, it's on Apple TV. I don't know how many people have Apple TV.
I think there's quite a few.
You think Apple users?
It's the least. It costs the least among all the premium streaming services. It only costs
Prime
$8.
did.
No, I mean, Prime also just recently raised their price.
Well, yeah.
But Apple,
I watched the first episode of Foundation. It was good. Like I said, only read the first book a long time ago, but it was interesting. And I think, I can't say if it's accurate or not. Do you know who Harlan Ellison is, the author?
No.
I found this out while doing research. He wrote a screenplay, got it illustrated to make a movie about the iRobot book, but in a short story format, because the book is a collection of short stories. Okay. So Harlan Ellison kind of was like, all right, let's do this take on it that would be more accurate.
Let's do it justice.
Right. So maybe because that had come out long before, in the early 90s, that published work, almost 10 years before this one did, maybe that had set up expectations too of like, wow, we're this much closer to a faithful adaptation, and then what they get is not faithful. Harlan Ellison wrote I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Oh, shoot.
With the supercomputer.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, he was the one who wrote the screenplay. I was like, that is ridiculously cool. So,
you know what I found out doing some research too is Jeff Venter also did a script for Foundation. As a movie, though.
He likes Asimov.
Yeah, he likes Asimov. And I didn't go through and read it, but it's like 111 pages of Foundation script. So,
I know that
you can find it for free
did
online.
A great job in the first episode.
Lee Pace is in it. Okay. Yeah. I want to watch it. We were talking about Apple TV Plus last night, and me and David, and we were like thinking about what is on Apple TV Plus. I'm like, what's that guy with the soccer show? What's the soccer show about? And I was like, Ted Lasso. That was it,
Ted Lasso.
Yeah. So I'd be watching that, but I think the main thing for me would be like Tetris, the movie about how Taron Egerton's playing the game, a businessman who helps get Tetris over to America from Russia during the Cold War, and it's supposed to be kind of like a drama as well, but it's how Tetris came to America.
More like a dramedy.
Yeah, it looked like a lot of fun. So I would probably watch that.
Probably wouldn't watch it.
Also, I didn't know. Well, we'll get to that when we do Short Circuit, but I want to watch Severance because one of the actors from Short Circuit. Is in Severance. And I'm like, I need to watch this because he's in every episode apparently. So anyway.
Okay. Other than that, I think one of the other things I pointed out, which I will bring up also during Short Circuit, is just how terrifying some of these scenes are. Because obviously the bad guy robots are supposed to be scary. And supposed to be creepy and scary. And they did a really good job with the design and the tension, the music, suspense, everything. I think one of the creepiest parts in this movie is when he's trapped in the tunnel and you're like, I'm going to die because I'm not getting out of this. And he gets out of it, which is amazing. And then the afterwards of that crash, there's one left and it's missing an arm and its legs are busted and it's not stopping till it kills him. It really embodied that scene. obviously the end when they take over. And there was one more scene that I was just like, wow, there's some really creepy parts in this movie. And it really embodies like the expectations of how people have imagined robots as like the Frankenstein's monster, which I guess the movie could be anti-Asimov in a sense that was the reason he started writing robots in the first place, was he was tired of the media and literature zeitgeist of this is a monster, so we must kill it because it's not human. So he was like pro-monster, right? And he wanted the monsters to be good. Like he was a Guillermo del Toro before Guillermo del Toro was around. Right. So that's why he started writing robots in the first place, because he wanted to see them as like helping humanity. And then he eventually came up with 3 laws. But there are parts of his short stories where the robots aren't so good, but they're still operating within the 3 laws. And it's just a matter of like bad programming. So it's not the robot's fault.
Yeah, imperfect programming from imperfect people.
Yeah. So it's just really interesting how like I'm watching it, I'm like, oh wow, this scene is really creepy. Like, oh, the music and everything is, puts you on edge. There's a lot of tension. It's intense.
That's something that I want to get into the editing a little bit now that you mentioned that, because like the editing's really good in this. Like it's not only a great action film and but also suspense. And it does a really good job of, especially with the cinematography mixed in with the cinematography and the directing as well, mixed in with the editing, they do a good job of making you feel small and insignificant without, I mean, there's even a spot where Will Smith is looking up at the other robots while he's on the ground. And yeah, they're trying to help him, but it has a sense of eeriness as they're reaching down, like, let me help you, sir. It's like,
you mean the very end? Like at the
no, when they're in the warehouse. And he's fighting, trying to get Sonny for the first time. And he's thrown.
Right.
Also, during that scene where he's like trying to find Sonny among the 1,000 robots, he's thrown by Sonny. And then he slides, and as he slides, the camera pans to the left. But as it pans, you can tell it's a cut, but you will miss it really easily. I caught it finally on this viewing, like after 20 years of watching this film. But I saw it, and he moved, and it panned into a different shot. It was like CGI Will Smith or the stunt double or whatever.
Oh.
And then it went to real Will Smith. And it's just a really clever like setup and clever pre-planning on the
so
production
much more
part.
evolved version of that scene in Evil Dead where he is like beating the old lady zombie down into the basement with the axe handle, and it's like a shot of her like coming at him, and then it immediately cuts to a shot of like a mannequin, and he's like,
yes, David, yes.
Much more evolved.
Absolutely, just like that, except with more continuity.
I will say, there's a scene at the end of iRobot where they're up on top of the thing and they're trying to get her brain, Vicky's brain or whatever. There's a CGI Will Smith that is obviously because the camera goes around one of the pillars or something, and he's CGI, and then he's real.
And then he grabs onto it.
And then there's a part at the beginning when, the very, very beginning, when he opens the door and the NS4 is FedEx, he grabs the face, and you can see his fingers are like moving on the face of the robot as he pushes it out of the way. So because that was like your first impression of a robot in the first place, I was like, wow, that was bad. And then as the movie went on, I was like, oh, that was just like a hiccup, because the rest of the movie is great with the action. But
it's so funny. I never caught that. His hands are like moving on the...
I noticed that this time. I was
That's
like,
really funny.
13-year-old me would not have noticed that, but...
Yeah, but there's that shot where it pans over, and just all the cheese scenes, all the tunnel specifically,
That's
where
a great scene.
He is, the big action set piece of the second act, basically, where he's being chased by the NSR trucks, and they're like cornering him, and he's stupid. He's like, I'm gonna take a nap while nobody's on the freeway at like. What time of day is this where they close off the freeway? It makes no sense. But
he's tired. He's been doing a lot of...
I get it, but like it's like just moving.
Like a predator.
Yeah, like a predator.
Into the prey.
And it's really well done. And just like that whole scene is really well done. And I think it cemented Will Smith as an action hero, because Wild Wild West ain't it. But Men in Black does a good job at it. But
I
don't think Wild Wild West is like, that tried to do what it tried
Well, and then
But
after
not
this,
really.
he went on to do I Am Legend.
Exactly, which Akiva also wrote,
Right.
which I didn't know. So, but yeah, I would say the editing really stands out for me. I also wrote down some random thoughts, and the first one is Will Smith swaggers down the street like a female Skyrim NPC. Okay, I
Where?
noticed this.
What part of the movie?
I noticed this on this viewing. That when he walks, he's like this. He's got his hands like out, facing out, like his palms are facing out, and he's like this, like a runway model. And I'm like, huh, that looks exactly. And I'm like, I've seen that walk animation before. And my nerd brain is like, oh, over the 100 hours I spent playing Skyrim and modding it, I'm like, that's a Skyrim female animation NPC.
Specifically. Now all I have in my head is the Manly Men Skyrim AI song. If you've never seen that,
Manly
I'm
Men
gonna have to
Skyrim
send you a
song.
link.
Yeah,
to
go and
that.
send me. David, do you know about this?
No.
All I can
It was
think of
a-
is friendship is manly.
No, it's just
That's
a
all I can think
Skyrim
of.
meme. One.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway,
Was there anything else?
I don't know.
3 Laws.
I just want to bring up the
Pretty
editing
scary.
because it's like it's really well done, and William Hoy has done so many things, and you can tell because this guy knows what he's doing, and it's just cool. Like this guy worked at Fox for years. He's working at Warner Brothers now. Like he's just really talented. And I love the guy because of what he's done. These good movies that he did. So, and I would compare this film in terms of the tension and the music combination to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes because it does a really good work at making you uneasy. Like from the beginning where you see the bubbles and the intro credits as well as the music, like, ooh, yeah, there's some good stuff.
Yeah, good
Indeed.
eating.
Yeah. What stood out to you about this viewing, David?
I would say most of what stood out to me in this viewing was Will Smith. Man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I have not watched a Will Smith movie in a long time, and just all those Will Smithisms, like there was a couple of them that just really hit me, and I was just like, ah, when I saw it.
Like a smack to the face.
Let me see. I think what was the major one for me? What was
the major Will Smith movie?
No.
no
That
what
was Hitch, David.
No, the major the one that
The ism.
where my reaction like just made you like start laughing uncontrollably.
I laughed uncontrollably. What was it? Was it the sugar part? The sugar quote?
No,
it was what was it? It was earlier in the film, I think. Or no, was it in the middle?
Yeah,
it was like middle to the early part.
Oh, it was when he
was he talking to Lanning?
It was when he meets Calvin for the first time.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And he's like, checking her out. And I can't.
And she's like, I've been told to like accommodate you in any way like that you need. And he's like,
Oh, in the elevator.
oh, really?
Yeah.
And she just doesn't get it.
And she doesn't
Like,
get
anyway.
it. Yeah.
And he just does it in the most Will Smithy way possible.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for it. And I would just like let out an audible groan, and then
It was also, to be fair, like 11 o'clock at night.
yeah, Jake just starts laughing uncontrollably.
I was laughing for like a good minute and a half.
But yeah,
It
I
was so
think
funny.
actually I will say though that what stood out for me on this viewing in particular, aside from Will Smith, was kind of what Adelaide was talking about. You had some kind of like, you had a lot of suspenseful, almost horror-esque moments in the movie that were really well executed. I kind of liked the demolition scene where he's in the house.
That one's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's just like you really like feel the terror of like trying to escape a house that's being demolished. Like, and the cat is kind of a weird thing, but it works in its own in its own weird way.
It adds more flavor to the scene or the sequence, I would say, because it's like if you're just seeing Will Smith running around a house that's being demolished, yeah, that could be a cool action scene, but this cat, for some reason, adds something, another.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's weird that, like,
an innocent creature to
well,
get
I mean,
hurt,
it's weird that the cat, like, comes in and out of the scene in the way that it does, because he, like, you know, he's like, oh, brr, when the robot smashes through the roof, and he, you know, you get a good sense of he's, you know, he wants to protect others, so he grabs the cat as he's running.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
But then he, like, you know, there's a part in the scene where, like, he kind of stops for a second and the cat, like, you know,
jumps off him,
but not like it wasn't just like a thing that happened. It was like very deliberate, because the cat, like, you know, like makes like a loud yowling, meowing noise and jumps off of him in a like really like abrupt sort of violent way. Like, you can imagine that it probably dug its claws into him as it was lifting off, you know?
Yeah.
And then it's like, so with that like clearly defined exit for the cat, like, it's weird that like it pops up again
when he's running to get out and the cat's suddenly by him.
Yeah. That part was weird, but overall, yeah, it does add a little bit of personality to the scene. But I bring it up because I never really noticed before how well executed the more suspenseful, sort of intense parts of the movie were.
Yeah.
What did you think, David, of the scene of him and Lanning going to the CEO after he gets fired for being a cop?
Oh, you mean?
And he's like, "Yep, just a 220-pound, 6'2" male," and then he's like he sneezes and he's like, "I'm allergic to, you know." What did you think of those Will Smithisms?
Oh yeah, that was awful. Yeah, this is like the loud sneeze and the just. Oh my God! Everything about that scene was terrible.
And while we're on that note, what did you think of Shia LaBeouf's insert in this film?
Yeah. I always forget he's in this movie.
Yeah, he's extremely forgettable. He's, like, in this movie, which is weird because he's so obnoxious when he does appear on screen. But
he doesn't act like a regular person or a regular teenager would.
he acts like he's just like hyper obnoxious.
He's like a cartoon character kind of.
Yeah, he's like the tag along. Like, if they made an adaptation of the short stories in an animated form, Shia LaBeouf fits right into those.
I don't know where he would be in that, but
can you imagine watching the early 2000s Ninja Turtles as a kid, and then this pops on? I, Robot, and Shia LaBeouf is helping him out.
Right?
Yeah,
they add Shia LaBeouf instead of the robot companion detective. It's Shia LaBeouf instead.
Oh my God. Yeah, Shia LaBeouf is weird in this movie in that he's extremely obnoxious and weird and just off-putting, but then he's also extremely forgettable, because as soon as he's off screen, he's just gone. Yeah. He's just gone, and then he reappears later on in the movie, and you're like, oh, wait, I forgot he was in this movie.
If we're gonna analyze Will Smith-isms here, I want to say the ones that did work for me were the ones where he's interacting with Lanning mostly. Like, some of the early ones are like,
you mean Calvin?
Sorry, Calvin. But, and I'll get into Lanning a little bit, but Calvin, not early on, like, some of those are kind of weird. The one about Jesus is funny, like when he's talking about
that one, I think is pretty
and just their back and forth banter, I think works. I have a terrible time analyzing if actors have good chemistry. I can tell when it's really, really good, but when it's really, really bad, sometimes I just don't get it. So I honestly can't give you opinion if they do have good chemistry, but it works in this film. And as she evolves from her more robotic state, like she is in the books, to more of a kind of normal looking human being and not like just a strict robotic scientist, it fits well. And Lanning's, Calvin's character is a good necessity in this film. And she's a good character in general, I'd say.
Rewatching it today, I was kind of wishing I didn't realize how little. I mean, she's a good part of the movie. In a good chunk of the movie, because obviously she's very important to it. But like, she's like a main character in most of the original short stories. So it's just interesting how, like, watching it, I'm like, I kind of wish she was in it a little more. But they don't got time for that, and it's about Detective Spooner, and it's about Sonny. Sonny wasn't even in it that much. So
Yeah, and then like even their discussions about like, oh hey, you were injured, and this is what it looks like, which is a weird scene. She's like touching his body, but she's like analytical. She's like, oh,
I don't think
wow,
she
that's
understands
crazy.
social boundaries. Really.
No, that's why you were talking.
Yeah,
about
I put a
her
note in
being-
here that said Calvin in the film seems. Sorry, David, neurodivergent coded. He doesn't like that term.
She seems
but
a little OCD to my sense, is what I would
she's
say.
somewhere on the spectrum because she just is very distant, very cold, very distant. I think that could have been like
here's
a
the thing.
ploy in the script to make you think
Alright.
she wasn't human.
Well, here's the thing, Ad. I remember 20 years ago when you're telling me about this film, like, why is she acting like a robot? And you're like, well, in the books, she works with them so much that she basically has become sort of robotic in her mannerisms and the way she acts. And because this is her lifelong study is robotics.
Right. Kind of.
Let's not get into this no stinking neurodivergent thing. Come on.
Kind of in the book, she used to be just like more, I guess, warm and more feminine and more of human, basically. And then there was an incident in one of the short story called Liars that really just kind of broke her. And she ended up killing a robot by giving it like, what do you call it? Like, she took the 3 laws and she said, you contradicted the 3 laws and you did this action and this action and this action. And she kills the robot. Technically, she just kills it. Ends with it screaming and it just dies. And it was because she liked someone, but the robot lied and it could read minds because it felt like it would emotionally harm her. But in trying not to emotionally harm her, it did worse emotional harm. So ever since then, she just has trust issues and she's distant. So the books, it's kind of backwards. She started out normal and then she got cold. And in this, she started out cold and she ended up getting more normal. So it's just interesting.
Well, I think too, like you could imagine like a sort of continuity where like she is the way she was in the books for the same reason at the start of the movie, and then her interactions with Detective Spooner sort of bring her back to a place where she feel like she can trust people again.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously...
It's one of the themes in the movie.
Obviously, it's, obviously this, it's not like... You can't really, like, say... This is the same Calvin in the book as the movie.
Yeah.
Like everything is adapted, everything is changed, but you can kind of sort of connect those two as a sort of narrative in your mind, and it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, from everything that I know about the books, which is very little, but knowing that, like, when he kills that robot in the warehouse and she's, like, mourning over it, like, oh my God, how could you do something like this? From what I understand, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of like her character in the books. Like, she sees the robots as a actual person.
Yeah, I guess you could agree with that in some aspect. Depends on what part of your life you're... Because by the time the short story collection ends, she's, like, in her 80s.
Okay.
So it just depends. I guess depends on what part of her life you meet her at.
Yeah, let's talk about Lanning for a minute here, because James Cromwell, good old Farmer Hogan himself,
Love him.
Great in this role.
Every time I see him in a movie, I'm like, oh,
it's Farmer Hogan
I know that guy
from Babe.
Good old grandpa.
Good old grandpa. But yeah, I love how his relationship with Will Smith's character Spooner is like, it's revealed little bit by little bit. And you can get a sense, like, now viewing it this time, like, oh, there's a ton of stuff they mention, like a ton of stuff, which I knew watching growing up, like just bit by bit, but seeing it revealed piece by piece, accumulating into like him having the conversation on the hill before the robots go crazy. It like really is cool, because at that point where it's like the music's building up in the background, the wind's blowing, and he's like, all right, doctor, here we go. And he's about to turn him on. You're like, turn it on the hologram. You're like, oh shoot, this guy helped repair him, saved his life. He has a connection to this dude. He found out he's getting really close to how he was murdered. Like there's an actual connection to this guy that he has that we didn't know starting out in the film.
Yeah, like a personal connection.
Yeah. And I really loved that aspect of this whole film, because, and I don't think I've seen that kind of dynamic before, where I don't watch a whole ton of movies or read a crazy amount of books, but or have a, I'm only 27. I haven't read everything, but I haven't seen a better example. Not a better, but I haven't seen a really, really good example of this kind of person's trying to figure out this person who died, but they're not their mother, brother, father, sister, but they're somebody who they really, really love and they were saved by them. And now they have to figure out their murder and they're getting this close to it. Like, I can't really think of an example like that.
I can't really think of an example either.
But it works really well. And also it works because this is the future and he can talk to a hologram that is programmed to have some responses, if not limited, I don't know. I just think it's a cool concept.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's a rather unique setup.
It feels like this is like one of the many aspects that were left over from Jeff Venture's interpretation. But I feel like we just don't know. And this could have been an Akiva thing. This could have been a Jeff thing. But regardless, it works really well.
It might have been inspired by the books in a sense that, well, they kind of did that in the movie too, where Dr. Lanning, even though in the book him and Calvin are closer in age, I think there's maybe a 20-year difference as opposed to the ages in the movie. But he was kind of a father figure to her and like they all work together to make these robots and study these robots and stuff like that. And in the movie, obviously, she sees him as kind of like a father figure. And so maybe that was inspiration that like this man was a light to all the people he interacted with. So his death is like a huge space. Like that's why it means so much to Spooner, is because he meant so much to him. Like, because he says, you're not working on the robot case again, even though after they got a gag order and everything, he's like, oh, he's trying to tell me something because he cared about him. He had a connection. So,
yeah. Let's talk about Alan Tudyk. Really, I want to talk about Alan Tudyk because this guy, as Sonny, he kills it. He is like the best. I would argue the best thing in this film. Like, he is so good in this role at being a robot, but being a robot that's a little bit human. It's like, huh? And then you find out who Alan Tudyk is. You're like, at this point when you saw the movie in 2004, you're like, oh, that guy from Knight's Tale?
That was the only thing I knew him from.
Huh? The weirdo peasant from Knight's Tale?
When did Knight's Tale
This
come out?
guy is like a new Andy Serkis? What?
Andy Serkis
It was 2001.
Yeah.
It was Knight's Tale.
Oh.
But man, he is just so good. And like, this was the role that we saw him in growing up Adelaide, where we're like, yo, this guy's an amazing actor. And everything we saw him in, and whether it be live action or animated, he's just such a wonderful actor. Like, super awesome.
He's a professional.
He's a professional.
He's very good at what he does. Like I said, everyone who worked on this movie just knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing, yeah. I think my last thing, I just want to say that I think this film meshes the detective mystery and the summer blockbuster pretty well, while being coherent and just the right amount of complicated. Like, it's like they threw Will Smith into an Asimov story, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it really is.
Along with some very digestible perplexions that we get from his writings, from what I understand. I haven't read his books.
I would agree with that, just because
they don't go too deep with it.
Obviously, it made over $300 million on like $100 and something million budget. You said
120. Yeah.
So like obviously, Akiva Goldsman and the director and other people, they know what they're doing and they know how to reach the broad audience or the general audience.
Yeah.
People who aren't familiar with Asimov's work. And as someone who is a pretty big Asimov robot fan, like, I think there was enough inspiration and reinvention in it to still make it feel like an Asimov story, even though he doesn't really have a lot of action-packed stuff in most of his novels.
Yeah.
There's always high stakes of like, oh, humanity could die, but it's not like getting blown up in a tunnel by the robots. That kind of action movie.
Yeah. And speaking of the action, dude, the ending scene in the tower. Like, I laughed
good
out.
Climax.
Yeah, good climax.
Really
but
good.
I laughed out loud. One funny side note. I laughed out loud when we were watching it. When he does the hero shot and he jumps and he throws his his rifle and they're all jumping at him and he's like in slow
There's
motion.
a lot of slow-mo in this movie.
Well, it's the early 2000s.
That's true.
You had Resident Evil, you had
X-Men,
Alias, all this kind of stuff. So, not to mention Kate Beckinsale and all the what's it called?
Underworld?
Underworld and all that kind of stuff. So, But yeah, I as we were watching, I'm like, man, again, this is really well done.
Good eating.
There's some good, good eating.
I feel full by the end of that.
I feel like, oh yeah, and like, and just the mystery wraps up perfectly with Sunny. I think it does it's handled really well. It makes me want more, which makes me sad.
We didn't get it
because I feel like Will Smith's at this point where he can pick and choose. No, he can't. But he's at the point in his career where he's trying to make that comeback. Did you guys see that he teased out a little thing about him being in The Matrix because he was offered The Matrix back in the day?
No.
You didn't know this?
No.
So the Wachowskis went to him first as Neo. He was going to play Neo.
Really?
Yeah. And they were like, hey, we're going to offer it to you. And he's like, no, I'm sorry, bro. Men in Black. And then he left.
Yeah.
So now apparently he sent a little thing on social media and everybody's theorizing. They're like, oh my God, it's going to be a movie, right? And everybody's like, dude, the Super Bowl's literally 2 months away. He's probably going to be a Super Bowl commercial as Neo. So I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
For Doritos or something.
Yeah, Doritos. It'll be like an Audi commercial or a Converse commercial, David.
Converse.
What? Anyway.
As long as he doesn't put in, do like what he did for like that big YouTube rewind that everyone hated.
I do not remember that.
You know, it'd be so.
Chelsea.
Oh, you're right. That was terrible. I was like, wow, that gave me flat. That was 6 years ago now. Wow.
That was, it was like one of those things that was kind of like a landmark. It was like one of the most disliked videos ever put on YouTube.
Yeah, it was like all the creators, but like all the big creators, just them.
Yeah, and then
and Will Smith.
Yeah, randomly Will Smith going like looking through a telescope, and I don't even remember what he said. Oh, is that
That's Hot? Where he looks through the
telescope.
That's
hot.
Oh, that's hot. Yeah, I know that meme. Yeah.
Oh,
I think he's funny. I think he's
I like the Will Smith.
I follow him on Instagram. He does some pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, he's some funny stuff.
Like he does TikTok stuff and like that.
Yeah, and I would think it would suck, but we are getting I Am Legend 2 eventually. Like Akiva Goldsman's confirmed to return. The director's confirmed to return. This has been in development, I think, for 2 years at this point. This was like right before the slap happened with Chris Rock, like right before that
That'll
happened.
Put you back.
So that put him back. But I could see him coming back for that for sure. And I think Michael B. Jordan's going to be in it as well.
Love that guy.
Like, I think give me some of that and give me like a revisit of the Spooner character. Like, I think they could do some cool things with it, but that'll probably never happen.
I think the best way to continue that would probably be like a series because long form television is really dominating, I feel like, the storytelling space right now in terms of media. So I think it might find more success in long form television, but I don't know how well, like, I don't know what the stats are for Foundation on Apple. Like, I have no idea how Apple TV handles their.
And what do you guys think about stuff like Foundation and it being pretty much the only example besides Bicentennial Man that I can think of.
With Asimov
of Asimov's stuff being adapted. Like, is there anything that pops to mind you would like to see in the future, being fans of Asimov?
Just more robot stuff. Like, I wouldn't mind a long form television series in the style of, let's say, Foundation or Raised by Wolves. And it's the robot novels that are the murder mysteries with Elijah Bailey and Daniel Oliva. Like, I think that'd be fine. Like, I would love that.
I would love Alan Tudyk to come back.
Me too.
Play that.
Oh, that would be good. Cool. He could be
not
the
Sonny,
android.
but he could be the android.
He could be the android detective.
Yeah.
You know what would be great is an adaptation of the actual iRobot novel in like the form of a TV series.
It would match that way better if they wanted the faithful.
Because essentially, iRobot is a bunch of short stories woven together into a larger story. And so it really seems like it would be perfect for a TV series.
Yeah.
And then even to get some of the material from the other books in the trilogy, as it were.
Trilogy/quadrilogy.
Would be pretty cool.
I would love to see it animated. That'd be pretty cool.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Maybe like get the team.
But not like Not like
Not anime.
Well, I mean, you could. What's that one?
Pluto?
Pluto works.
Yeah.
Pluto works.
Yeah, it
but
does.
that's what's his face? Chelsea's guy.
Or like like something Asimov style, like Asimovian robot story in the style of like Astro Boy. Like that
That's
could
what
work.
Pluto is, basically.
That could work.
Yeah.
Because Pluto involves an android detective trying to solve murders of these robots that are being killed by another robot. It's interesting. If you haven't seen Pluto on Netflix, it's pretty good.
It's really,
but
really
it's
good.
based off of the works of the guy who made Astro Boy. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry, Chelsea.
Atama Tezuka. Something Tezuka.
What's his name?
Something Tezuka. Atama? Tezuka?
Atama
No, not
Tezuka?
Tatama. David, do you know?
I do not know.
I don't know.
Tezuka.
You were close.
The guy who did Metropolis.
Right.
And Astro Boy.
So yeah, and they could do a spiritual. I feel like Pluto is kind of like a spiritual blend of Asimov and Tezuka.
You know, we're getting those Netflix anime series like the Cyberpunk one, the Terminator one that came out.
Love,
that
Death
I heard,
and Robots
that I heard
too is a
great.
good example of various animation styles
Ooh.
involving robots of some kind. So I wouldn't mind seeing an iRobot series
That would be
doing that.
cool.
So like each have a different director for every episode, different style for every episode.
And Blur Studios do it, or just as an anthology?
Or just anything.
That would be cool. Each episode's an anthology. That could work out really well.
I did think of something that I thought was interesting,
Yeah.
which is funny, like the 2025 version of me. So
Okay.
I'm like watching this movie.
You divergent.
And
I'm joking.
Will Smith is the lead, and you never think anything of it. And then as I was thinking, I was like, if it wasn't Will Smith, what other like popular or famous black celebrity was there at the time?
Denzel.
That's the only thing I can think of, though. I mean, you have Wesley Snipes, but did Blade happen then? It happened in the late 90s,
Blade was 98,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So
Or
there's
97.
Wesley Snipes, but I don't see him doing a role like this. So it's just
No.
interesting how like I've since then
Unless he's a robot hunter, then yes, it would work.
I would not watch that movie. I would not watch that movie.
But yeah, you bring up a good point.
I've just gotten more into like Afrofuturism, and I'm like, this is technically Afrofuturism because you have a black main character. And
What?
It is.
What? No, get out of here.
It is.
No,
it's not.
It takes place in Chicago. It surrounds.
Will Smith is like one of like three or four black people in the whole movie.
I know, but I'm like,
It
for
is
the
not
time,
Afrofuturist
for
in
the-
any sense.
for the time,
in any sense.
they starred a black main character, and the whole thing with his grandma who had to raise him is very much part of that situation with a lot of black families, where like the grandparents had to raise them. He has a boss who's black, and he has to figure this all out for himself. And I'm not saying like the fact that he's black has anything to do with the story. It's just cool to see that because I actually just got Nnedi Okorafor's newest book about a black author who's involved with robots, which I think is just really cool.
Who's the author?
Nnedi Okorafor.
Okay,
She's my main girl. I have like 10 of her books. But it's just really cool to... I was watching this, I'm like, if they had put Leonardo DiCaprio in this role, or like somebody else, it would not be... You would not have that element of... Would even be in Chicago still kind of situation.
I mean,
Maybe.
Maybe, but... It's just cool. I think it's really cool. I know
It's cool because his skin is dark.
Will Smith is not the blackest black you could get. But for the time, he was very popular, and he was an action hero.
He's popular, but like Will Smith and being black, like, and this movie, like, there's no crossover there.
So let me ask you this, Adelaide, because we're treading on some very light ground right now. At least I think you are, and I'm not.
None of us can speak for African American groups.
Let me ask you this: is Wild Wild West an Afro-Western?
No, because Will Smith's not the main character.
Sorry. Because he's black. It's in Chicago. It's in the future. That's your argument. No, I'm not familiar with this Afrofuturism. okay, that you are very into and you read.
I will
and you're
say
familiar
that
with.
the subgenre of Afrofuturism does tend to focus more on like the heritage and like the lineage of the main character, and there is always themes of like being proud of who you are and everything, and don't let the world beat you down kind of situation. But it's always involves a science fiction element. So whether it's like robots in the future or it's space travel, like the Binti trilogy, which is technically more like African futurism. It's just,
actual African futurism,
right? Because that takes place in not Nigeria, but
yeah,
it's the main character's part of the Himba tribe. Anyway,
well,
I just think it's interesting because, like, they didn't do. It's not trying to go out of its way to say that. It's just an interesting detail that, like, me who's read all these things and gotten more into that subgenre, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting for 2004.
I mean, it's not really that interesting for 2004, because it's literally there's nothing about this movie that was groundbreaking in any way in terms of the race of the actors that were in it.
Well, no, I agree with that, but I'm just it's just an interesting detail because I'm like, if it was Leonardo DiCaprio, I think it would be. It would
probably be a better movie. It would probably be a better movie.
Denzel, like, would that be the same?
I think
argument?
Denzel would be really.
Yeah,
cool.
Denzel would be amazing in this movie.
He's
but would
older
it be
than Will Smith,
Afrofuturism?
right?
Like,
what?
Is he older than Will Smith?
Oh yeah,
right?
he's 70. He just turned 70.
Did he really?
Yeah.
He looks dang good.
He looks good. Black don't crack.
He doesn't.
So,
now we're getting on to thin.
Well,
thin
speaking
ground.
of racism, let's go on to our next film. No, I'm joking.
Oh, that's a great segue.
That's a good segue.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. One last thing on iRobot. That scene. There's so few pieces of it, but that scene.
What scene are you talking
The
about?
scene in the police station. Oh man. I wrote down some notes because when they introduce, like, hey boss, he opens the door and he's like, hey boss, and then like you hear the drums.
Oh,
like,
the
start.
end?
Yeah, no, yeah, near the end when the robots are taking over in the police station. He's like, what? And then the guy opens up. He's like, hey chief, we're getting calls. People are like, and then you hear the drums starting, and then you hear the distant call out, stop that, ball, and then boom, the doors break open. You're like, oh shit, it's going down, and then. Chi Bride, who's the chief, is like, I got this big ass shotgun, boom! And I'm like, oh, this is the most badass thing I've ever seen as I think it was 7 at the time. I'm like, oh my god.
That's so
I love iRobot unabashedly.
me too. I think as an older viewing it now, I like that interrogation scene a lot more than I didn't really take it for granted before.
Yeah.
I really like that scene a lot.
Yeah. And speaking of films I love, let's move on to our second film about robots, guys. All right. Short Circuit. Welcome back to 1986 for an exciting dive into a funny, quirky romp about a robot that is animated, functioning, vivacious, and alive. Directed by John Badham, who also directed Saturday Night Fever, War Games, Bird on a Wire. Written by S.S. Wilson and Brent Maddock. Oh my God, the guys who did Tremors. And Jay Tarsis, who not familiar with, but sure, cool. Starring Ali Sheedy, Steve Guttenberg, Fisher Stevens, Austin Pendleton, and Tim Blaney as Johnny Five. Budget, $15 million. Budget, $40 million. Not too bad. Probably made a crap load of money on VHS rentals and all that stuff as well. Runtime, 1 hour and 38 minutes. Guys, what do we think of Short Circuit? I was very speculative.
I think you should go first on this one.
I was really speculative. When we came up with the two robots, I'm like, Short Circuit, David, we got to put it in somewhere. And you're like, well, what else could we add? And I'm like, we can add. Well, this would be hilarious. How about we add iRobot? I think you actually should. You're like, how about we add iRobot? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, that would be hilarious. And so I've watched this growing up, and I haven't seen it for like 15 years probably, or maybe a little less. But dang, after rewatching this, I'm impressed. The comedy works really well. All the acting's pretty okay. It's a kid's film, but it all works kind of like iRobot. It all just works, I think, except for maybe Fisher Stevens as the not Indian guy. But overall, it succeeds as a kid's film, family film, whatever. And how cute is the performance of the guy who plays Johnny Five? is what stood out to me. Oh my God.
Pretty
This
adorable.
guy's awesome. And the fact that we're going into it, but this was the guy that voiced him on set when they were doing it. Like he would talk to the actors in that voice. And they liked it so much when they were editing the film together. Like instead of voicing it over with a celebrity, they're like, dude, can you just come in and redo all the lines? And he's like,
nice.
yeah, sure.
Didn't know
He was
that.
the puppeteer, one of the puppeteers of the robot. So like I was quite tickled watching this film and laughed profusely through the whole thing. And I was like, this is a very enjoyable film. And I'm not really nostalgic about this. This is like coming from a breath of fresh air. So rewatching this, I'm like, I don't know. Something about this film, it hit a chord with me. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I even think the directing and editing are, good, and they get the job done. It reminded me a lot of Flight of the Navigator, which was also 86. Like this film, I think actually works a little better than that film. But it I don't know. I feel like it has lots of elements that work. And yeah, the acting's a little annoying, but overall, what a picture. All right, what do you guys think?
I would have to agree that overall this
who else is divergent? Jake is.
Oh my God.
That's what that silence told me.
Me and Dave were like, okay, what are we gonna
Okay,
do
kid, we're trapped in this room with him. What are we going to do?
Okay. So yeah, I would have to agree this movie is it's pretty endearing, which is kind of a testament to it because there's a lot of elements of this movie that are kind of grating.
I agree.
Like there's a lot of grating elements to this movie. Like the acting, the characterization. Yeah, it's mostly the acting. Like the way all the characters act in the movie is just like, it just kind of like, it just gets old. But overall, like it still manages to be an endearing film. So that's it. It definitely managed to accomplish that. Like it draws you in to actually care about the characters and their the situation. Despite the fact that they're, pretty much all the human characters in the movie are extremely annoying, but
They are.
they still manage to make you care for them anyway. So it's a pretty good movie. Yeah.
I think the only actor I thought when we were watching it last night that I could stand like watching on the screen for more than 5 minutes was the guy who played Mr. Larrabee in What's Up, Doc? The guy with the glasses who's always stressed out.
Austin Pendleton, yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I felt like he was the only rational person in this movie.
Everybody else felt like
Everyone
a cartoon.
else like a cartoon character. Everyone else, it was like a live action cartoon. But I think that was the point because it's like a family film that's somewhat wholesome.
Yeah, it's a weird mix of like wholesome and dirty.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess I guess that kind of works in what they were going for because, it's like one of those things where it's like, if you're watching with really, really young kids, they won't get it.
Yeah.
But like the parents will.
Right.
Kind of a thing. So it kind of works in that sense, but it's also strange because it's a little more like nowadays you have things like a lot of Pixar movies do that kind of well, where they have like stuff for the adults and stuff for the kids.
Right.
And it is a little bit more like it fits together better.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it kind of like, it's almost feels like it's flitting back and forth between two extremes.
Yeah.
So it's a little jarring because of that, but it's also kind of like unintentionally hilarious because of that too. Yeah. You're just like,
they'll throw stuff out and you're like, what was that line?
Yeah.
Like, what in the world?
Like we had to one of the things we had to rewind it because Because, like, I was pretty sure I heard what I heard. And Jake's like, what was that? What did he say? And so we rewound
what did he say,
it.
Dad? What does that mean?
And we rewound it, and it's like, yeah, you would never see that in a movie marketed as a family movie or a kids movie now, where someone talks about sporting a tremendous Woody.
What I think is interesting too is that they chose a character who had specifically a hard accent to follow.
Yeah.
So like you're not going to hear a kid repeating that because they're not going to know what he said. We didn't know what he said until we put the subtitles on. But
I caught it.
You did.
I caught it. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about it. I was like, did I just hear that? And then we rewound it and put the subtitles on. Yep, that's exactly what he said.
Exactly what he said, yeah. Oh, man. Well, let's just get into it. Let's get into Fisher Stevens as, Ben Jebituya or whatever. Like, Ben is his character, who is Indian, but Fisher Stevens is not Indian. So they doll him up in makeup. They make his skin a little darker. And he sports an really horrible Indian accent.
Yeah.
But I think that's on purpose. Because I'll get into the trivia here in a little bit, but I do want to talk about Fisher Stevens because he apparently had like just a few weeks to prepare for, like, he was going to be one character. And then the guy who was going to be the Indian guy dropped out. And they're like, oh, can you do this? And he said, I guess so. And so he worked with, like, I think, I'll get into it. But yeah, he worked on an accent. And this is what the product of it was.
Interesting.
So I'm conflicted with this because here's my thing. In this new era that we're in, David, there's this pull of being like, oh, I'm offended for you. But I feel like this film actually is justified in being offending for other people. Like,
I don't think it is.
No? Well, okay. So so why do you think that?
Because it doesn't affect me one iota that's Fisher Stevens played an Indian guy. Like I don't care. If if I knew some Indian people and those specific Indian people that I knew were upset at his portrayal of an Indian character, we could maybe have a conversation about that.
Okay.
But outside of that, I just don't care.
Yeah.
I just don't care at all.
I think of I say that because I think of people that I know who are from India, or I know somebody who originates from Sri Lanka, and I'm like, oof, I probably wouldn't want to watch this with them.
But do you know for a fact that they would be offended?
No,
by it?
I don't. So that's not the conversation.
That's the thing is, I don't know any Indian people very well, but I know I'm acquainted with a few of them, and like until those people specifically, I have a conversation with them specifically about the Fisher Stevens portrayal of an Indian being offensive. Like,
it's so niche. Like I
don't I don't care. Like the larger conversation to be had about it, I don't care. Yeah. And I wish people wouldn't have the larger conversation because honestly, I feel like it doesn't solve the problem.
I feel like because we've had
canceling Apu,
that's
ridiculous. Apu is an offensive stereotype of an Indian convenience store owner voiced by a white guy.
Yeah.
Canceling Apu did not remove racism from the world. It didn't even subtract a small amount of racism from the world. It, in fact, the level of racism in the world has remained at the same level it was since Apu was canceled. So all these larger conversations about is this offensive or is this appropriate or is this problematic? All this stuff that we as a culture are preoccupying ourselves with isn't actually making anything better.
That's correct. And there's nothing that can come out of that conversation, I think, because this was 86. this was in the past. It's been done. Like, you can't change anything. It's not like they're going to go on to Disney Plus or wherever you can stream this, which you can't stream this anywhere. You have to buy or rent it.
Which is hilarious.
Which was hilarious.
I was trying to watch it.
Yeah, we were trying to watch it on the DVD, and it did the thing when we tried to watch The Rock. It's a very early DVD, and the Xbox out there wouldn't format it right or zoom in or fit to screen. So you're watching basically a 4:3 aspect ratio DVD, but you're watching it in widescreen. So it's like just smaller in the middle of the screen. So we had to buy. David, thank you for buying it on YouTube so we can watch the HD version.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
Is right before David said, I bought it, I was trying to get mine to work and the internet was slow. Right after he said I bought it, my card went through and I bought it.
Oh, you own it now. We can rewatch it again.
It's on my YouTube account too. So
okay, so because I tried to buy it first because I'm like, don't worry, guys.
Yes, that was going on.
And my Google account for some reason wouldn't rent it. And I tried to buy the standard definition, wouldn't work for $5. I tried to buy the HD version, wouldn't work. I did it multiple times. I checked my bank account, nothing happened. So there was an error.
Was it
and David's
card?
like, okay, fine. You failed. I'm going to do it. And Chelsea's like, Adelaide's like, I'm going to do it too. And as David's like, I bought it. And Adelaide silently in her head was like, me too.
Well, it was like slow. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll just hit X. And I'm like, it's not working. And then he said, oh, I just bought it. And then it went bing. And I'm like, oh. I guess we all own this movie now on YouTube.
At least I want to.
You can watch it as many times as our heart desires.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Fisher Stevens. I have an unabashed love for this actor. And I bring that up and I say that, David, because it made me rethink of that conversation. But you made me kind of realize in your explanation that, it is kind of like, we don't need to be offended for other people. Like, let them be offended by what they're offended by. Because here's the thing. Apu is a great example. Like, I thought it was so stupid. Even the dude who played Apu for years, who's just some white dude, was like,
well, I mean, Hank Azaria is more than just some white dude.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not familiar. I wasn't familiar with his work, like the meme. I wasn't familiar with, Hank Azusa or whatever his name is. But anyway.
I'm just kidding. I'm not that big of a Simpsons fan.
I was like, I thought you were serious.
I'm not that big of a Simpsons fan.
But that's a great example. Done for years. Nobody cared. In fact, he did a really good job. And he's a good voice actor. But because of the era we lived in during that time, people are like, we need to get offended by this. This all started with that chick in Africa that made that joke online and she got canceled after she got to Africa. It's like, I feel like that's not relevant anymore. Like we already had the conversation. If you go on YouTube and you figure some of this stuff out, you can find, or on the internet in general, you can find out and explore this conversation for yourself if you really want to, Mr. and Mrs. Snarp Fangle person. But I feel like, it's like racially insensitive is what I would consider it. But man, the guy's funny. And man, he does a good job.
We did laugh a lot.
And I laughed a lot. I thought he was great. And look, I get it. It's like 86. They weren't thinking about that. But I don't even think they need to think about that today. Like, dude, look at Family Guy. Look at Robot Chicken. There is so much messed up stuff in those like series. Mm-hmm. I mean, just look at American Dad. Like that has tons of stuff like that in there. And it just is rolled on through. You mean like
race jokes and
race
stuff like
jokes
that, yeah.
And just obscenely racist jokes, which are hilarious. And we all laughed at them. And we've had this conversation, David, how a generation, mostly millennials, but also Gen Z too, and some X, were raised on Family Guy and all this other stuff. And they're like, I'm offended for you. Because it's some social credit that you get from somebody's opinion.
Yeah, that's really the thing is all this stuff is about people, all this talk about stuff being problematic mostly focuses on people being offended on other people's behalf.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, like being offended on someone else's behalf doesn't actually accomplish any good.
No.
All it does is it makes you feel like you're a good person.
Right. And then I think your actions and what you do after that really says a lot. Really what you are as a person or who you are as a person.
Yeah, that's what you see over and over again.
I think there's also go ahead, sorry.
A lot of the people who really seem to like push the conversation about race like, it turns out that they're more racist than the people that they want to call out. Like, this is what I notice a lot of the times. It's like we were talking about, black people in film for iRobot, and it's just like there's so many people who want to paint one segment of society as like, oh, they hate black people or they fear black people or whatever. They're backwards. And, but we're not like that. We're working on ourselves.
Right.
We're like, we're open to having those conversations. But then when you actually like look into who they are as people, it's like, it becomes clear that they view themselves as like the saviors of these black people, that, these black people are like, just like can't get by on their own because, they're just not like, they just don't have all the privileges of white people and they just can't make it in this world and they need our help to lift them up. And it's like, no. That's actual racism.
Exactly.
To think that black people are so beneath you that you have to be offended on their behalf and you have to speak for them. And you have to fight their battles.
And it goes against what... It's funny how we're recording this on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Like,
happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Like, it goes against his things. Like, treat everybody equal. Don't, like...
Right.
Like, if you're going to give special treatment, give it to everybody.
Yeah. I think there's just a quick note on David's commentary there is like, yeah, it's very selfish, this need to be the ally. But are you really trying to just be an ally and just be there for people when they need you? Or are you going forth and making these claims to make yourself the center of attention kind of situation? Yeah, it's all about selfishness and
insecurity, I would say.
And feeling special, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. And also it gets into like sort of this weird like fetish for collectivization.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That people seem to have, It's like people say they want to be an ally, I want to be an ally to black people. I want to be an ally to trans people or whatever marginalized group that they want to be an ally for. And it's like, that's meaningless. That's utterly meaningless. I don't want to be an ally for some group where I think of them as all the people in that group as some kind of monolith. I want to be an ally, to use the verbiage, for the people that I know and the people that I care about and the people that I interact with who might need me in some situation to be an ally for them, no matter what group they belong to.
Preach, brother, preach.
Yeah, it's just, I don't like this hyper collectivization sort of thing that seems to be happening in the culture where black people are a monolith, gay people are a monolith. It's like, no, people are their own individuals. It's like we were talking about introverts versus extroverts a little bit before, and it's like, you have a lot of people who define themselves as either belong to this group of what they call introverts, and the others belong to this group called extroverts. And I'm only privy to this because I know people who are, kind of into that. And so I come across their posts on social media. And so I'm like from the outside looking in, trying to understand this mentality. And I'm like, I don't even know if I am an introvert or an extrovert. I can't even figure out by the criteria that I see in the interactions that these people have online, like where I would even fit in this group. It's like, and so I think I just got to a point where I gave up trying to belong to a group.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see myself as part of some sort of collective of white people or collective of males or collective of straight people or whatever.
Ideologies or whatever.
Yeah, it's like I gave up trying to fit into, like, slot myself into a group a long time ago, and it's so much more freeing when you stop thinking of people in terms of categories, because now if I'm trying to find common ground with somebody, it comes down to a conversation between them and me, and what groups we belong to don't have to be a part of that, don't have to be a hindrance to that. It's like the whole thing with Fisher Stevens playing a East Indian character, or not East Indian, but whatever he is.
Yeah.
Indian of some kind. I don't remember there's some kind of subdivision there. I can't remember what he was supposed to be. But
From Bakersfield.
Yeah. From Bakersfield. Yes. Bakersfield, Indiana. No.
Yeah. He's like, where are you from? I'm originally from Bakersfield.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it doesn't make the world a better place for me to think about the impact that his portrayal of the character has on East Indians or Indians in general as a group. Like, it does nobody any good to think in those terms. But if I were to meet a person from India or a person of Indian descent, and we started having a conversation, and they ended up telling me that they were extremely offended by Fisher Stevens' portrayal of this character, it's like, okay, we could talk about that specifically.
Yeah.
We could have a conversation about your particular offense, and maybe we could come to an understanding between ourselves. But we don't have to involve the group.
Right.
The group doesn't have to be involved. In fact, thinking in terms of groups would be a hindrance to that.
I think it's interesting you brought up Apu from Simpsons, because that blew up this last year?
Oh,
that
it blew up 5 years ago.
Well, there was some kind of conversation happening earlier last year where they were talking to voice actors, like a whole bunch of different ethnicities and stuff, asking them their opinion on, like, how do you feel, like, Phil Lamar, black voice actor who voiced Samurai Jack and everything, who was a Japanese man in the cartoon.
Yeah.
They asked his opinion on it because there was some group of some kind that got upset that in the past white people had played cartoon characters that are of other ethnicities. They said, what is your opinion on it? He says, if they're a good voice actor, go for it. And I think it was he brought up The Simpsons, and I don't think he had any qualms with white people playing characters of other ethnicities, because he's like, they did a great job. If they can do a great job, let them do it. It was great.
And Phil Lamar does a fantastic job as Samurai Jack. I mean, I know I'm biased personally because I grew up watching that as well. But
yeah, I love that movie or that show.
But dude, Phil Lamar's amazing. Yeah. Like, he can play a hardened veteran Green Lantern, but also play Samurai Jack. Like, he's really good at what he does. And two things in what you said, David, that came to my mind is, number one, the reason why people focus so much on the group and like associate with that, because they're trying to find their identity, because they're insecure in their identity, especially when they're up and coming. And that's one thing that society or ideological groups have done, is create this distraction about race and finding a collectivism kind of thing. And by race or whatever, because it distracts you from the main thing, what's important. Some of the libertarians out there will say, well, it's classism, obviously. No, guys, come on. But I think it's because when you're trying to find who you are as in your identity as a person, you latch onto these things, and then you get the weird ass thing where people are like, I can't remember what it is. There's a educational term for it in higher education, but it's like, you're this and this and this, and that's your
intersectionality.
And I've been exposed to that for years working in the education system, and I just don't agree with it. Like, I feel like life is way more nuanced, and that's their method of bringing nuance to that group mentality, but it doesn't work. It's trying to mesh two different things, and it's in this weird aspect. But that's just one thing. Number two is, it's interesting because, man, we're getting really deep on short circuit. But anyway, it's interesting because you have people like Phil Lamar be like, look, he said it as it is. Like, if you're a good actor, then do it and act, and then just, if you can pull it off, you can pull it off. Now, that's voice acting. I feel like in Hollywood, there's a lot of people who ask those questions that don't want to, like, get in quotes canceled or lose opportunities for jobs and stuff. So they'll say safe answers. I don't think Phil Lamar did that. I think like he nailed it on the head. I personally feel like, in my opinion, he can get away with that answer because it's voice acting, but an actual acting.
Right.
Like, have you guys seen the meme of Black Panther, but played by Ryan Gosling?
Yes.
Like that, like recasted T'Challa
I can't remember
as Ryan
what
Gosling.
the
They're like, that doesn't work.
instead of Wakanda Forever, I can't remember what it was.
TikTokian Forever or something.
No, it had something to do with like a frat house or something.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
but I also think in this conversation we're having, I think of that video that goes around where it's the dude who's dressed up as a generic looking mariachi fella with a fake mustache and everything. And he says, hey, like, he asked, do you find my costume offensive? And he's asking just like college students.
I have seen that video, yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it's offensive. And then he just goes into like the side of town where all the Latino and Mexican people are. And he asked them, and dude, these people are just trying to be polite. Like, they're just saying like, no, it's not racist at all. And they're probably being honest, but also like, I think it's about the conversation. Like, and it's not about like, I think it's about the I think it's like, that's the point of that video. It's like, he goes to the Mexican side and they all say, no, it's not offensive at all. What are you thinking? Like, you look great, whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head though when you talk about identity, because unfortunately, Western culture has become so individualistic and fragmented that the kind of strong bonds that people would form that gave them a sense of identity in many ways are absent from our culture today. Like, kind of in our circle of people, it's a little different.
Yeah.
But in a lot of environments, especially in big cities, where people move away from their families for job opportunities or whatever, you have this sort of thing develop where people are just there in this environment and they have no connection to one another because they all left somewhere to come here for economic reasons.
Right.
And so they're just these fragmented, free-floating individuals just milling around in this soup of people. And so there's a real identity crisis in that they're searching for connection, they're searching for meaning, they're searching for who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
And what our culture doesn't have any answers for them because our culture has spent so much time trying to deconstruct things like family, things like tradition, things like faith.
Yep.
That really the only answer that's left is to sort of latch on to whatever group identity or movement that makes you feel like you belong somewhere.
Right.
And I think you have a lot of people who are with not so great intentions exploiting that to try and stoke up conflict over these issues.
Yep. And I feel like that's the key right there is they're taking advantage of people who are looking for a home, who are looking for acceptance in whatever form they want to find it. And my heart goes out to them, but also I have to acknowledge reality and say that if the person does a good job in the role, that person does a good job in the role. Doesn't matter if it can affirm or not affirm your life. Like I've always brought Last of Us 2 up in this podcast, and I'll bring it up again. I don't really resonate to the way that game's written in terms of the ideological themes it's trying to say, in terms of the characters they're trying to uphold because of their identity, in quotes, whether it be gay, lesbian, or trans. I don't agree with the writing, but I can find the good art in that. I love the combat. I actually love some of the characters in the story. There's good to be found in there. Like, if you can make a freaking good story, make it in there. That's why I don't give crap to stuff like In the Heights or anything, because multicultural, you're being exposed to this, but that is a really good musical and does a really good job of also showing this culture and what it might have looked like to a person who never experienced it. So I kind of can look past these writers in Hollywood that take the kind of ideological stances and what people have associated to be woke, but to also find nuance in that. Because I feel like that's what we're getting at. There's nuance to your identity in itself. So why do we have to group everything together? And that's what it leads to. Is any time, and that's why I don't like what was the word you said? I keep forgetting to it.
Intersectionality.
Intersectionality, because it's surface level. I'm a farmer. I'm straight. I am conservative. What have you? It's like
I'm robosexual.
Yeah, it could be it's surface level. It's not getting to the heart of things because society has deconstructed the family, tradition, and most importantly, faith. Because I think all of us in this room agree that you have to have your identity centered in Christ, and you will find great fulfillment in that. But the world tries to find a replacement for it, and that's their replacement.
It's funny you said Hollywood, because I'm like, Hollywood's only goal, no matter what movement is happening, is for money.
That's exactly.
So if woke is not popular,
people are talking about this woke thing. Well, what's considered that? Let's bring Ibram X. Kendi and write something.
Can we bring in?
Yeah, exactly.
That's really
the thing, too. How can we take advantage of
the
situation?
That's really the thing, too, is all these conversations about racism and intersectionality and blah, 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 they're really only being pushed into people's attentions because there's people behind the scenes who want to make money.
And with that, let's continue our discussion of Short Circuit because, man, that went deep.
The title of this episode is going to be like,
Fisher-Stevens sparks the race
deep.
debate.
Yeah.
On Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Okay, so I'm going to get into the IMDb trivia and just go from there. All right, so many of the little tricks done by Johnny Five on screen, like flipping through book pages in a blink of the eye and tossing a washer into the air in a mimic of, were done using relative simple yet ingenious sleight of hand prop effects. For instance, the pages were flipped using an air hose, while the washer was flipped using a piece of string, or washer. Okay, the coin he's flipping. Yeah, the coin he's flipping. Just a string on both ends, and it goes up and down, and then they reverse the scene, and that's how they do that. Number 2, $1.4 million of the film's $15 million budget was spent on the creation of Number 5. So like a tenth of the budget or more. Also, Number 5 weighed 250 pounds. That's a heavy robot. Number 2, in this film and Short Circuit 2, Johnny Five's voice was provided by puppeteer Tim Blaney. This casting decision was made due to the director's belief that real-time interaction with the robot prop would make the interaction seem more natural on screen than if they edited Johnny's voice in during post-production. I'm going to skip some of this.
Do you talk anything about the special effects company?
No, not yet, but we can get to that soon. According to Fisher Stevens, the character Ben was originally intended to be Caucasian. The role was then rewritten to be more of a Canadic ethnic part after Brosnan Pinochet, who was in talks to play Ben. When the deal with Brosnan fell through, Fisher was asked if he could make his accent more ethnic to make Ben's scripted lines funnier. Okay. Fisher spent 5 weeks living in India to prepare for the role.
Wow.
His performance convinced many viewers that he was Indian, but Fisher stated that he would never be able to play that role again. Obviously. I had the obviously in there.
That's funny.
Okay, this will be the last one for me. Puppeteer Tim Blaney was selected to voice and operate number 5 on set after John Badham heard Blaney's robot voice and liked it. Blaney was originally intended to supply only a placeholder voice for number 5 during filming, which was to be dubbed over later by another voice actor. After 3 months of filming, the crew got so used to hearing his voice as number 5 that they could not imagine anyone else in the role, and so Blaney was officially cast. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of other stuff in here. I mean, 2013, I'll add one more. In 2013, it was announced that a remake of the film was developed, and it was rumored and speculated that Fisher Stevens would return as Ben.
Really?
But that's speculation.
2013.
Yeah, it's right before the crazy happened.
Yeah.
What do we like about this film?
Number 5 is very cute. We kept saying Wally, like Chelsea was like
Wally.
So much like Wally. Even down to like his little vocalizations, like he sounds a lot like Wally. So I think that was the purpose, to make him lovable and a cute character. He's innocent. He's just born out of magical lightning for some reason.
Yeah, he's like, it's a shock to his system.
I have
he's
comments
like,
on that, but
well, I think the idea is that like a freak accident happened and it fried his circuits and rewired them in some sort of like procedural way that like
I know, like
created sentience. I'm assuming they were going for like a parallel to the idea of like that the origins of life are, often said to have, come out of the primordial soup, so to speak. And something
God put creative in
and
this
something
robot.
very much like a lightning strike or whatever, energize the molecules in this primordial soup and cause them to become the first, primitive living organisms or whatever.
I guess from that point of view, it kind of makes sense. But I took it as like it was a Frankenstein's monster situation because Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel is said to be the great-great-great-grandfather of robot stories. I don't know why robot specifically, but I think it's just the idea of like the monster is not actually a monster.
Oh, like our man creating something.
Well, like man creating something and then
life.
putting fear on this thing we don't understand or that's different.
Well, also man creating something that is a facsimile of a human being.
Right.
I
It's
think.
not God's creation, it's man's creation, and so
yeah.
therefore it's a monster. But I think the lightning thing kind of reminded that because like Dr. Frankenstein rolls him up, gets electrocution, lightning, and then it's alive. So that's what I was thinking. And then number 5 kept saying like, I'm alive. So I'm like, all right, maybe they're doing like a Frankenstein thing, but
that could have been.
I don't know.
That could have been.
It could be anything.
They probably didn't think too deeply about it. Is my
Probably
supposition.
not.
No.
What was my note here? Hang on. What was my note on that?
While you look at that real quick, the Sid Mead actually designed was in charge of the design of number 5. And that guy did the design for the AT-AT in Star Wars, a ton of different vehicles and many different science fiction stories and films and TV series, as well as a lot of stuff from Blade Runner and the such. So
yeah,
it's
it
pretty
says
cool.
Dream Quest Images.
Oh, an Alien. He designed a ton of stuff in Alien.
Yeah, Dream Quest Images is the special effects company that worked on the special effects, including the puppets in this movie. They worked on movies such as Beetlejuice.
Wow.
Where's the one you just said? Blade Runner.
Oh.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. They worked on the Predator mechanics for the Predator movie.
Oh, that's cool.
So that kind of stuff.
All right.
Back to the Lightning. I said Lightning also apparently allowed his voice box to change from the voices of the robots that they normally were,
That
because
makes so
now
much
he can
sense.
expertly impersonate commercials with the voice box he has only been given. There isn't, like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
like,
I think the robots all have that capability,
to change
like, because
voice.
like the voice is synthesized, so it's not a stretch to imagine that they were, just have the ability to synthesize whatever kind of voice they want. But like, obviously they're not like thinking beings.
Right.
They're just,
Following programming.
they're just following programs. So they're programmed just to, give a basic synthesized voiceover that's functional for what they need to accomplish. But they might, with the technology in them, might have the capability of synthesizing other sounds besides just regular robot voices. That's my understanding of it, is that Johnny just being a sentient being now, being like a living being with his own mind, is finding creative ways of making use of the capabilities he has.
Right.
Whereas there is no reason for, robots designed for the battlefield to be, imitating
Dr. Pepper
commercials and stuff
right.
like that. The technology might allow them to synthesize whatever voice they need, but they're not going to do it because that's not what they were designed for. But then, since Johnny is his own individual now with his own mind, he's making use of his abilities to do something outside of his original programming.
Right. I guess.
I mean, the dude laughs at jokes and stuff. I mean, they didn't put much thought into this.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I don't think they thought about that either. Like, it's just a silly robot.
Well, I mean, they didn't think too deeply about it,
Right.
But what I'm saying is, it makes sense. You can imagine that sort of thing would have happened. Like, it's not a stretch for me,
right?
That his voice is different now, and that he can do all that. It's not a stretch for me, just because of, like, I can imagine a scenario where he already has the capabilities to do all that.
Right.
And now that he's his own individual being, he's learning how to make use of that. But that doesn't mean, but just because I can imagine that doesn't mean that they actually thought of that.
Right.
The impression I get is that they did not think of that at all.
My final note, like, in that area is, I'm like, it's in the realm or within the line of, like, 80s fantasy family film, like Back to the Future, for instance. It's not up to the level of Back to the Future.
No.
Nobody jump up at me for that. But it's just in the same line of, like, science fiction fantasy. Like, there's no way a DeLorean's gonna reach 85 miles an hour?
88 miles per hour.
And then go back to the
past,
future.
yeah.
So, like, it's in the same line. It's like, there's no way lightning's gonna strike a robot and then suddenly boom.
And it's so random. They're like, oh, it's getting a little cloudy out here. We might as well go inside. And it's beautiful and sunny. Like, okay. And then, like, oh, the last test. And then like,
it is Oregon on the coast, so you never know.
Yeah, that's true. A little convenient, but true. So I love, I want to talk about, like, the voice of Johnny Five is really funny and really cute and endearing, like you were saying, David. I love the story of how, like, oh, okay, you, the puppeteer, do the voice. Oh, you do a pretty good voice. Okay, cool. So do it. And they did that for the whole film, and that's what the actors were used to as they're doing it. And as they're editing the film, they're like, hey, we actually really like your touch on this. Can you come in and voice him? And he's like, yeah, of course. And I don't know what else he did. He did a puppeteer for a ton of Muppet movies, a ton of series as well. Like, he was, Tim Blaney went on to do a bunch of stuff in the future. But man, his voice is so cute and wonderful and fits perfectly with this. I never seen Short Circuit 2, and nor do I want to. But I feel like even in then, I feel like it was the same formula. So, yeah. But speaking of Short Circuit 2, really quick, I did miss one, and I think it's pretty poignant. So I'm going to read it here. There was a script for a possible third Short Circuit movie written in 1989 and rewritten in 1990, but it was found to be unsatisfactory by the producers, and the project was subsequently scrapped. According to Variety magazine, in April of 2008, Dimension Films had bought the rights to make a third Short Circuit film, in which the plot would involve a boy from a broken family meeting and befriending number 5. It remains unclear, however, if this movie would have been a sequel to the first two or a remake of this film.
Wait, what year was that?
This was 2008. They bought the rights.
2008? Because Dimension did the Spy Kids films.
Yeah, so it seems like...
That seems like it would be in the same line of it.
Yeah, but I'm glad that never happened. So
it could have been cute.
But also the writing. I have to bring up the guys who wrote this.
Okay.
Because it's the two dudes that did Tremors. Which
you love that movie.
Holy crap. My boys... My dudes, who my S.S. Wilson and Brett Maddock. Oh my God! And some dude named Jay Tarsis, who I sure did a great job on the script.
I don't know who that is.
But 1990 was when Tremors came out. That was 4 years away, and they're just doing screenwriting for some kids' films and whatever have you. And then they get this idea. They're the guy was sitting on a rock. I think it was S.S. Wilson. He was sitting on a rock and in the desert on vacation. He was visiting family or something in Arizona, and he was sitting and he's like, what if I couldn't get off this rock? What if there was a reason I couldn't get off of it? That's an interesting idea. And that led on to Tremors. And
that's
I'm
crazy.
Yeah, and and now they have 7 sequels, which I haven't seen all of them, but who knows how good they are. But I've seen up to 4. Yeah, 4
I
with
think I've
the
seen
prequel.
up to 4.
But man, and it makes sense because some of the writing in this is a little similar to that. It has that feeling. Now that I think about it. And I feel like that's why I give this movie so much credit. And I feel like the reason I definitely like it more than you two. You guys said, man, there's some grating elements in this film, especially the acting. And I agree, but I feel like it's all for a purpose. And I feel like they meet that purpose, whether it be through maybe some not very well done acting. I feel like they do shoot what they were aiming for.
I feel like with any comedy, though, you're going to have some cringe. You're going to have comedy moments that is not going to appeal to everybody, or jokes or lines or whatever. So, yeah. Yeah,
well, I think of Tremors oh, Bert, get your gun. And then you have in this, it's this, I can see the early workings of some of the characters. They wanted to go deeper because I feel like the characters of Tremors for some reason are super deep and super relatable. They don't really meet that here. They don't quite grab that. It's not character focus. It's Johnny Five focus. Well, or maybe it is character focus.
They might have been we're supposed to make a family-friendly film that both kids and parents can watch together and laugh and stuff. Yeah. Let's make it. So
yeah.
That's the thing is, that I think is the biggest flaw with this movie is there's not much depth to the characters other than Johnny Five.
Yeah.
Clearly there's a connection between Johnny and the Ali Sheedy's
Stephanie.
Stephanie. There we go. Yeah. Character, and then sort of by proxy, you have a romance between her and Steve Guttenberg's character,
and maybe number 5 by the end of the movie.
Oh God,
maybe.
But so you have sort of the bare bones of character building, but ultimately
they don't go for it.
There's just not really much there.
Yeah. I don't know if there needs to be either.
That's what I was going to bring up. I don't know if there needs to be. It's kind of like a Flight of the Navigator, David. They give you just enough to get you going. And it's an 80s film. Okay, cool. It doesn't have to be super deep. I'm not watching Blade Runner.
Wait, okay,
here.
I get that one mixed up.
However,
is that the one with the little kid who gets abducted?
Yeah.
Okay. I know the movie
with Pee Wee Herman as the robot.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a different movie.
Yeah. Which is kind of creepy when you think about it in hindsight. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is I feel like it doesn't need more depth, David. Does it truly need Short Circuit to have super in-depth characters to work? Because I feel like
I don't know. I would have preferred there to be a little more depth there to where I could like sympathize with the characters a little bit better.
Okay, yeah.
Because the way they're played in the movie is they're very like
They're almost like cartoon characters.
Yeah, they're very cartoony, but like a little bit of cartooniness is fine.
Yeah.
But like there needs to be some sort of depth of character that you can grab onto, that where you can relate to. And that I think is where this movie falls flat for me, is like there's nothing there for me to relate to the characters. And like you eventually find yourself caring for them in the end, but it's kind of a long, arduous process where you have to get sort of, okay, I'm just like gonna endure this like awful acting kind of a thing, where it's like characters can have flaws.
Yeah.
But they gotta attract you somehow.
You gotta entertain.
Yeah, you gotta be able to grab onto the characters somehow. And I think like they just managed to they just hit the sweet spot with the character of Johnny Five so well that you kind of grab onto the characters like through him, essentially. Like because he cares about Stephanie, and because he eventually also cares about Steve Guttenberg's character, you sort of begin to care about them as well.
Yeah.
But those two characters on their own don't do anything to endear you to them.
Yeah, if you take Johnny Five out of the situation, you're like, I don't want to watch this movie. Like,
so I just found I was looking at the quotes. Dude, there's a little bit more racism than I thought it was in this movie. Frank says, how? Robot, me, friend. Stephanie then replies, talk computer, not Apache.
Yeah, she did say that. Yeah, she did say that.
I was like, dude, what the heck? But dude, speaking of quotes, your mother was a snowblower. It's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then what's the one? The one that Ben says. Obviously the Woody one, but the one where he's like, I'm thinking she's a virgin, or at least she used to be. There's some amazing dialogue in this film that is, racially sensitive. But man, is it funny. And hits.
That's one of the thing too, is this movie is hilarious.
It's hilarious.
But not intentionally.
I agree with that.
Like the lines are funny not because they were written, not because they were particularly well written, but just because they come out of left field in a way that just
true.
Just like hits you.
The farmer's wife. I hope you took the grass out of the glove compartment.
That came out of left field.
That came out of nowhere, and I didn't catch it until like a minute after it happened.
Old couple driving.
What are they talking about? And I was like, oh, that's what they're talking. Okay,
it is Oregon, even if it's in the 80s.
That's a good point. Oh man, but yeah, like Newton says, "Holy shit," and number 5's like, "No shit, where's C shit?"
Yeah, it's
one that stuck with me was where she's naked in the tub and he says, what do you say, nice firmware or nice
software.
Nice software, which doesn't make sense because firmware would be more accurate, but
yeah. Oh man, but yeah, I don't think you gotta go too deep with this film. I feel like I'm very biased in this film. I grew up watching it, but I didn't feel that way, like fuzzy. Like that fuzzy feeling of something you revisit. Like I didn't feel that watching this. I just
like if someone talks bad about it, you're like, don't you dare.
No, like I just watching it this time. I'm like, oh, I remember watching this as a kid. I don't remember this at all, and I'm glad I didn't, because going into it, I'm like, oh, this is hilarious. Like it just felt kind of organic watching it this way. So yeah.
So you're saying you kind of felt like you experienced it sort of for the first time again, instead of like experiencing nostalgia.
Yeah. And I love the little inserts they do, like The dude directed Saturday Night Fever that directed this. So, of course, we have to have a scene from Saturday Night Fever in the film. And, of course, there's a dance scene with Johnny Five and Stephanie. And it's like, dude, the whole scene of him tearing apart the car.
That was pretty funny.
That was pretty friggin' funny.
I think the hilarity of that was like, by the time between him leaving, going out the front door, and them following him, it was like 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
And so he like go out and he organized every part of the car onto the lawn in 30 seconds and took it apart with like a wrench of some kind.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny. That was like kind of funny. Like how that's the hilarity of that is the absurdity. You're like, how could he do that?
I just rewatched that scene before coming in here. If you watch that scene, it seems like he's trying to make the guy jealous and impress Stephanie. Like, it seems like he's just trying to impress Stephanie by all the stuff he's doing. He's like, pretty good, huh? Like, it's super cute. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Fisher Stevens, my last thing will probably be about Fisher Stevens.
One more thing about Fisher Stevens.
I love him because he's my boy, because he was in that show Early Edition. And I'm like, which is my favorite show ever.
He was the friend, huh?
He was the friend, Chuck. And it's just, oh my God, like him and Kyle Chandler's chemistry is amazing. And that's also another example. It's weird because there's one of their best friends, the kind of tertiary character in that series is she's like blind and she needs a guide dog, but she's also black. And there's like different stories that intertwine with that too, and in really creative ways in terms of, our back to our race debate, but that was an amazing show. Went on for 4 seasons. 2 are amazing. 3 and 4 are okay. Like 1 and 2 are okay. But Fisher Stevens is also in Severance, which I did not know about.
Oh, how old is he now?
He's got to be 60 or 50 something in my mind. Because he's like he's also the bad guy in Hackers.
Be older than that.
I think he was in his 30s when he did Hackers. So, and that was 90 something. So he's got to be in his late 50s is my imagination. He looks pretty old right now. But yeah, I love this film. I also love iRobot. There should have been 2 robot films Jake loved, I guess, I don't know.
Hey, I loved iRobot at least.
But I don't know. What are you guys' final thoughts on Short Circuit, and would you watch it again?
I think I'm good. I think Short Circuit has satisfied my palate for that kind of movie for the near future. I'm okay.
Yeah. David?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Is it better than Flight of the Navigator? Yes or no?
I think it's better.
I would say it's better than Flight of the Navigator.
It's more palatable, I think, than Flight of the Navigator.
It's you just have a more like the character of Johnny Five is much better to is someone when you could really grab onto and sympathize with as a viewer. Whereas the characters in Flight of the Navigator aren't that strong. No. But yeah, this is a pretty good movie overall. It's quite funny, maybe not for the reasons that the director intended, but it is quite a funny movie. So yeah, I like it.
I want to know what they were thinking when they were making it. Like they were like, let's just have the farmer's wife say this, and like, because that would be just completely out of nowhere.
I don't know. Yeah, like I said before, I don't think they were thinking too deeply about any of the decisions they were making on this film.
Yeah,
it's like
you have
it's almost like with the. Every time you move into a scene, okay, like what happens in this scene? It's almost like, wouldn't it be funny if this happened? Like, and then they just wrote it in there.
Yeah, and they sneak in so many things with Fisher Stevens' character and his accent. Like, so many inappropriate stuff. Like, instead of I can't remember what he says. The original, the thing he's supposed to say, but he's like, oh, we are about to go out and spread our legs, yes.
It's so nice to see you going out and spreading your legs.
It's like, oh my God.
I think it was supposed to be spread your wings.
Yeah, spread your wings and fly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. So there's comedy to be found in this, and it's definitely of its time. And man, if they ever made a remake and Fisher Stevens returns and he's like talking normally, he's like, I just lived in America so long, like this is my act. This is
what
my
would the
normal
robot
accent
look
now.
like though in 2025?
Well, like what you do to remake is they find it in a garage somewhere.
Oh, you think it'd be the same?
It would be the same puppet,
and you bring back Tim Blaney, and you could use CGI or whatever, and you have Fisher Stevens or Steven Gutenberg come back, or Ali Sheedley or whoever, maybe one of them, just one of them, and be like, oh my God, I remember this. And she's got like a daughter who just had a newborn or something, and they find the robot.
So it wouldn't be a remake, it'd be a sequel.
It'd be kind of, you could do a sequel, yeah. But the reboot, the kids find it, they think it's cool and funny.
So it'd be a soft reboot.
Be a soft reboot, yeah. Have Fisher Stevens come in at some point, because he's awesome. So
he would get in so much trouble now from all the talk of like the groups in Hollywood and woke this. He'd get in,
Wow, I just looked at the time. Yeah, we should probably get going. So anyway, if you've made it this far on the podcast, we thank you so much for listening and for listening to any of our part of it, really. Hope you have a good day, and we'll see you later. And Snarp Fangle on.
Bye-bye now.